Really?
Oh, that's even more, yeah.
Are we ready?
Are we expecting anybody else? Are we all set?
Everybody we're gonna have.
Recording in progress.
That's okay. Good evening. I'll call this August 27th, 2024 Fairfield Plan and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Start with our meeting minutes from August 13th, 2024. I have a motion on the item. Mr. Harrison,
I'll make a motion to approve.
motion to approve. Is there a second? That's a fair point. We have, is Commissioner Collins sitting in?
Yes.
He's sitting in for Commissioner Ford, right? Commissioner Collins, you're up to speed from last meeting?
Pretty much, yes.
So you second the motion?
Yes, I did.
Commissioner
Harrison,
sorry.
I'm called a lot worse. It's no changes, no edits. Thank you.
Commissioner Collins? Any further comments?
No, sir. Thanks, Tom.
Commissioner Braun?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda by adding a closed executive session to discuss 15 Uncle Road and the two court cases we got an adverse decision on a week ago or so, or 10 days ago.
Yeah, my plan was to talk about that after these items that have been published.
Pardon me?
My plan was to talk about that after the meeting tonight. Should we need to have a special hearing or a special meeting, closed executive meeting later this week?
Right now, I mean, very soon, because that's already 10 days old, I think.
I know this motion, that's okay. Well aware of the timing, we'll talk about it tonight, and if we need a special,
So we're staying after the
We're
meeting.
very motion on the table for the minutes right now,
yeah, there is,
so
so
we'd have to adjust yours differently.
can I just address this quickly? So we'll talk later this evening, and if we need a special meeting, we will do so. Any comments on the minutes tonight?
Pardon me?
The minutes, the motion on is
No, I didn't realize we were still on that. I was making a separate motion
I know.
to amend the agenda.
you know,
Okay, I'll make that after this. Okay.
even after what I just said? That's fine. Motion, is there any, on the minutes, anything further? Oh, your hand's not up. Can we move to a vote? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Passes unanimously.
So can I make a motion to amend the agenda to add a closed executive? We are gonna have one then tonight anyway, right?
No, my plan was, since we have two items that I expect to go all night
Okay,
that we would talk about it after our curfew at 10 for a little bit to see where we are on it. And should we need an executive session, we'd have a special meeting sometime this week.
this week. Okay, is the town attorney here tonight or?
No.
Okay, we have lawyers on our commission, so
Yes. That's fine.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Next item is 4185 Black Rock Turnpike, request of Paul Riker of 100% release of a $172,325 bond pertaining to special permit improvements in the design commercial district.
Mr. Chairman, this property is the newly completed shell of a medical office building. The site improvements are all completed. You've got a memo in your materials from the engineering department recommending 100% bond.
Thank you. Commissioner Corsillo,
Motion to release.
thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner Levy seconds. Commissioner Corsillo,
Our engineer said the work was performed. It looks like the work was performed. He recommends release, so not to.
thank you. Commissioner Levy,
Nothing further.
other comments or questions from the commission? Straightforward. Can we put this to a vote? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hands. 7 hands, passes unanimously. We'll move on to our next item is going back to public hearing for 161 Hillside Road. Special exception application of the Nest Hill Inc. pertaining to additions and alterations to an existing building to establish a daycare use in the neighborhood design district. We were in the middle of public comments. Attorney Green, there he is, was in the middle of his presentation, so I think we should finish up with you, Attorney Green. I'll open it up to the remainder, to the public comment to see who else needs to speak. I would ask if you've already spoken, not to come up and repeat yourself, if there's something additional, be it. But we do have other business to get to if we can. So we will go with Attorney Green, finish up with public comments, go to rebuttal. Yes,
Attorney Russo is online.
Russo is here online. Okay, that's good to know. Commissioner Harrison.
Yeah, just a quick, just for housekeeping, if I may, I have some questions for the applicant, traffic engineer.
We have rebuttal.
So we'll be able to do that.
Yes,
All right,
that's.
perfect. Great, thank you.
Right, Ms. Harrigan, anything else, or I think that's about right. Attorney Green, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission staff. Once again, my name is Joel Green. I practice law in Bridgeport with the law offices of Reed and Gross. It's my pleasure to be here before the commission this evening on behalf of Ally and Stuart Cagle, 772 Hill Farm Road, Mariana and Charles Demora of 776 Hill Farm Road, and Zach Cabana of 225 Hillside Road. Each of these property owners, again, own properties that abut subject property. And you heard many of their concerns, well, from me, but certainly from the public at the last session of the public hearing. So this application should be denied because it fails to meet both technical and general standards in the zoning regulations. I have a few general housekeeping matters before we dig in, and I just want to address a few matters in the record. And I promised Mr. Wendt I am going to move it along at a fast pace this evening. It's a matter closed in due course. But so the first item is I note that the applicant had included the code review memo, or the code review memo is included in the application, but the applicant had referenced the code review. And I just want to remind the commission of the provisions of section 7159B of the Connecticut General Statutes, which deals with pre-application review of the use of property. Once again, that's 7159B.
Is it sub B or B on its own?
It's 159 small b, there's no paren, so it's sub B.
So it's on its own, yeah.
Correct. And the import of that section is it basically speaks to pre-application review under a variety of chapters in the Connecticut General Statutes, but significantly for purposes of this commission, chapter 124. And what it says is that any determination is not appealable, but well, it says literally, such pre-application review and any results or information obtained from it may not be appealed under any provision of the general statutes and shall not be binding on the applicant or any authority, commission, department, agency, or other official having jurisdiction to review the proposed project. And so it's just what it is. It's a discussion beforehand. It's not binding on anyone. The thing that is significant, I just want to point out, is that it is once again preliminary. And in this case, the site plan was significantly modified after the code review. And there were also obviously consultants' reports submitted that were not part of that process. So really, I think it should really be significantly disregarded in terms of how this commission deals with this application. I next want to deal with McLaughlin versus Planning and Zoning Commission of Bethel, which is part of the record in this case. And that is a case that involved a special permit to create a crematorium in Bethel, bordering on a residential zone. And the court held that while the commission may deny a special permit based on the applicant's failure to comply with general standards in a municipality's zoning regulations, even if it complies fully with technical standards, it can only deny an application if it has specific evidence, and it cautions commissions not to rely on general speculative evidence In McLaughlin, the commission denied the applicant's special permit application to operate that crematorium because of supposed negative impacts on the surrounding environment, property values, and development potential. And while the court agreed that sort of the general standards in your regulations could be sufficient grounds to deny a special permit, the court held that the basis for the commission's decision in that case inappropriately focused on fears surrounding the operation of the facility in general, and not the specific crematorium at issue, development decisions motivated by general objections, and evidence not pertinent to the required considerations. And the appellate court ultimately reversed the decision of the commission. So what the ruling really means is that the commission must take this on a case-by-case basis and have evidence to support its decision. And while the applicant put that forward, because obviously, the commission did hear a lot of concerns from the neighborhood, I think it is readily distinguishable in this case because so many of the residents who got up for the commission at the last hearing really gave you very site-specific comments on observations of that site, and really substantial evidence as to the significant traffic issue and safety issue on that site. My clients retained Mr. Monteleone, who appeared before this commission and provided expert testimony, and the McLaughlin court certainly recognizes expert testimony as being specific evidence on that. And so it is readily distinguishable, and I just wanted to get out front on that.
Just remind me, Attorney Green, it's a part of our record now because I think the applicant's attorney referenced it.
Yes,
Submitted it.
Which is, okay, thank you, and you're rebutting it. Got it. Thank you.
exactly that.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
I was here remote last time, so I didn't see any of your exhibits that you handed out, but everything that you handed out has been posted, so if I have that, then I have everything.
Yes, and I actually, I posted a number of exhibits yesterday, much probably to the great chagrin of staff, but I just want to assure everyone that by and large, I posted that just to create the record. I don't intend to read through or in many cases directly reference many of those documents, but I thought it was important that they be in the record. And some of them were zoning regulations, for example, specifically, and the zoning map specifically, and some deeds and field cards and that sort of thing. So there was a significant volume of documents. I think the only document that, well, there was a comparison overlay plan, but that was based on a plan that was created by the applicant last Thursday. So I just want to emphasize that these are just demonstrative exhibits for the most part. I have paper copies tonight if you want me to hand some of them out as I go.
Was the one that was, not the ones posted now, but the ones that were handed out last time, which one was that? Just so I know if I
I
have.
don't know that I submitted exhibits at the
I
last.
saw handouts coming out.
I think the applicant gave out
Attorney
handouts.
Talented.
I think that one of my clients had submitted some photographs
We have
potentially
a few from some of the neighbors, but everything that was submitted is in the
record.
And I believe
Okay.
the applicant only gave out the big handouts, so.
So this McLaughlin case is sort of the springboard into a discussion of the sort of general standards. There's the technical standards in your regulations that deal with setbacks, that deal with height, that deal with dimensional requirements, coverage, and that sort of thing. And then there are what we call sort of general standards, or are sometimes referred to the court as soft standards in the regulations. And that McLaughlin case was actually sort of one of a series of cases where the appellate court has been dealing with sort of this tension where there are these sort of soft standards that are not hard and measurable, for example, directly. And in this case, section 27 deals with special exceptions such as is before the commission. I have section 27 if you want it. I'm happy to hand it out. If you don't, Now, for purposes of this application, the sort of the sections that you'll really wanna sort of focus on, in my view, are 27.4.1, which is sort of that catch-all: location, type, character, and size of use in buildings and structures shall be in harmony with and conform to the appropriate and orderly development of the town and the neighborhood, and not hinder or discourage appropriate development of use of adjacent property or impair its value. 27.4.3 is significant. It speaks to the street serving the proposed use shall be adequate to carry prospective traffic. Provision shall be made for entering and leaving the property without creating undue hazard to traffic or congestion. And adequate off-street parking and loading shall be provided on the same lot in accordance with section 28 of the zoning regulations. 27.4.5 speaks to conformity with the master plan. Interestingly, 27.4.7 deals with day nurseries specifically. And it says the use shall be situated and developed so as to create no nuisance nor have a detrimental effect on the privacy, tranquility, or value of surrounding property. So that's sort of the that sort of sets forth those softer general standards.
Commissioner Randolph.
Point of clarification. Day nursery is not a defined term in there. Do we understand that that's daycare or is that?
Well, the thing that makes me pretty convinced that it refers to day nurseries is the next line is the special exception shall be limited to group care programs for children and for a period of not more than 5 years. So that I think that's instructive on that.
Thank you.
Sure. So I'm going to get back to the soft standards shortly. And I have to comment that Attorney Fallon did a good job as always in presenting the application, but I kind of say, as a lawyer representing an applicant, lawyers representing applicants generally throw the snowballs, but they count on consultants to make them. And in this application, there are just a number of infirmities and defects in the plans that I want to bring to the commission's attention. The starting point would be this overlay drawing, and I have it's going to be easier to see it here, an enlarged version of a portion of the site.
It's already in the record.
It is in the record, yes. So the significance of this exhibit is the red printing that you'll see are features that were on the existing conditions plan that was provided by Land Surveying Services that is part of the original submission. So that is the existing conditions plan. The blue is the latest version of the proposed development of the site. And the significance of this is that you can see from these drawings that no driveway or parking space on the site remains the same. So in this case, the entire site is being reconfigured by the applicant. And significantly, you can see that there were formerly diagonal parking spaces in front of the building. On the back of the site, there's a portion of the site on the northern portion of the back parking lot where there were no parking spaces behind the building. You can see the curb cut, and the applicant had described this in its presentation. The curb cut for the rear lot has been moved to the west. The curb cut on the front of the building has been reconfigured and moved. There are spaces on the southeast corner of the site and in front of the building. And following the last hearing, the applicant added some snow, some areas for snow plowing to accommodate the snow plowed from the site. So I would next call the commission's attention to section 28 of the regulations concerning off-street parking and loading. And I just have an excerpt from that. And significantly, 28.1 provides that overall, no off-street parking loading spaces shall be established, constructed, enlarged, extended, relocated, or altered except in accordance with these regulations here after parking regulations. And these regulations therefore by their terms require strict compliance with their terms. 28.4, so just to begin, 28.4 provides for you, one parking space shall be not less than 9 feet by 18 feet. And then it refers to vertical clearance and striping and that sort of thing. So the minimum size, and I know you're aware of this from other applications, as to the minimum size of parking spaces. And I bring this to the commission's attention, and I have enlargement here of the revised site plan. Here. I don't really understand why this was included, but you'll note at the top of the page, which is the western boundary of the parking area behind the building, there is a notation that says varies 16 to 18 feet. And in fact, every parking space to the north, and you'll see a thin elevation line that shows 100.7. All of those parking spaces, so 9 parking spaces, all those to the north, every one of them is less than 18 feet, and therefore do not constitute a parking space under the zoning regulations. And there are no variances granted to the applicant. Apparently, they needed to do that to accommodate the required 24-foot driveway. And as you're aware, one of the significant issues in contention here is the capacity of the site to receive traffic and to provide adequate parking during the peak morning hours. The applicant had suggested for this staged plan, which my clients look at with great skepticism. And as I indicated at the last session of the hearing, there is zero room for error here. And we don't believe, based on the site plan provided and based on Mr. Monteleone's testimony, that parking provided is adequate for morning queuing.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Commissioner Braun.
So the plan that shows the overlay, that's the original is the red and the new is the blue.
Correct.
And so the new plan you gave us is just the new portion of that. the
Correct.
blue portion.
That is
So
the blue portion.
Did they change the size of the parking spaces between the old and the new? And
They did.
it's hard to tell from looking at that.
They did. They're shorter.
They're shorter and some of them are narrow or just shorter?
I didn't see them as narrower, but I saw them as they're shorter.
And that was,
They range down to 16 feet in length on the northern end of the lot.
and where does it say that it says varies 16 to 18 feet?
Right there. Yes,
That's their description. You
Correct.
didn't modify this, that's
correct,
okay,
correct. But that made me, I created a full scale drawing and I scaled it.
okay. And these two this is your plan, this is their plan.
These are both their plans.
But
The
The overlay is not theirs, right?
Correct,
Okay, you just put one on top of the other.
correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next is section 28 of the regulations. Where are we? Okay. Section 12.10.3 of the regulations is in the design district regulations. And as you're aware, this is a neighborhood design business district. The commission had adopted architectural standards. for developments. And 12.10.3 requires a parking study, which was submitted, but I call the commission's attention to number 2. 12.10.3 number 2 says requires that off-street parking shall occur behind or on the side of structures. Now, the purpose of this was it says to allow buildings to front partially or wholly on sidewalks. But I think the technical reading of it is that the commission did not want parking in front of buildings in a neighborhood design business district, and certainly for purposes of future development, you wouldn't want parking spaces in front of the building. And if you look at the enlargement of the site plan, you can see that there are at least 2 parking spaces that have been located directly in front of the building. Now, the applicant may note, well, hey, we got rid of these diagonal spaces, but I think the point is they're completely reconfiguring the site, and under that section of the parking regulations that we talked about earlier, you can't relocate, you can't construct, enlarge, extend, relocate, or alter except in complete conformity with the regulations. And obviously, they're using a new portion of the site to put parking in front of the building. So it does not meet section 12.10.3 as it's worded. Okay. Again, I'm just gonna reference back to that soft standard which says that and this is kind of a follow-up to my last comment, which is 27.4.3, which again reiterates, in addition to what section 28 said, 27.4.3 says that adequate off-street parking and loading shall be provided on the same lot. And once again, it says in accordance with section 28 of the zoning regulations, and that's specifically in the special exceptions section. So that further reinforces the need to conform with section 28. Okay, setbacks. I had submitted deeds for several properties. The subject property, 161 Hillside, obviously borders on Hillside and Hill Farm, is in the neighborhood design business district. Directly across Hill Farm are my client's properties. They include 255 Hillside, which borders on Hillside and Hill Farm and is in a AAA residence zone. So right across the street is the AAA residence zone for this NDBD. 772 Hill Farm and 776 each border on Hill Farm and are also in the AAA zone. And Hill Farm Road, I submitted the zoning map, and Hill Farm Road forms the dividing line between the neighborhood design business district and the AAA residence zone. So why do I raise that? I raise that because it would be my position that the properties abut each other, basically, and the zone line is the road. And just, I know I don't want to use up too much more time here, but 30 seconds on roads. First of all, as many of you may have heard over time, the law presumes that owners of properties on streets in Fairfield traditionally own to the center line of the road. So on most streets, unless it's a subdivision where modern subdivisions, you have the road sometimes deeded to the town. But typically, historically, the law presumes, once again, that properties owners across the street from each other, they each own to the center line of the road. And each of these properties are subject to a public highway easement, which is the road. And the public highway easement is imposed by law, and it grants to the public the right to pass and repass over the road and the right and duty of the town to pave, improve, maintain, and repair the road. So if the road were to be abandoned or discontinued, and that's happened in town, then at that point, the public highway easement is extinguished and the property owners' rights they each own to the center line and it's no longer subject to the road. So in this case, the boundary line is defined by the road. Therefore, these are abutting properties for purposes of the zoning regulations. Where the subject property is in the NDBD and my client's properties are in the AAA zone. I raise that because there are regulations regarding setbacks. And in 12.7.6, and I have a copy for the commission, there's setbacks for you'll see 12.7.6 deals with setbacks. I'm sorry, I'm gonna forge on. If anyone has any questions, but I call the commission's attention specifically to 12.7.6.4. And 12.7.6.4 speaks to adjacent residence district boundaries. And it says setback shall be 10 feet or the same as that of the adjacent residence district setback requirement, whichever is greater. I read that to say that in this instance, the street line setback in a AAA zone is 60 feet. And it would be my reading of that regulation that the applicable residence district setback requirement would be a 60-foot street line setback on that side of the property. And therefore, sort of this attempt to building of that is a legally existing but non-conforming by virtue of the building existing in the setback. And I had provided the zoning grid to the commission that established the dimensions and setback, and it's in the 40-foot range. But I would suggest that any attempt to put any structures in between the building and the road would not be appropriate because it would be non-conforming. Now,
10 feet or the same. So it's either 10 feet or the same, which you're saying of the adjacent, which is 60 feet.
correct. So it's the greater of, and I think the purpose of that was that you wouldn't harm residential neighborhoods by butting commercial buildings right up against the property line and across the street as a
The
whole.
neighborhood district is like that, isn't it?
Is that?
Isn't that the whole business district like that?
It may be legally existing, but non-conforming.
Okay, but if that's your position.
Yeah, I just question, does adjacent refer to a common boundary? Is this property adjacent to the street and doesn't have a common boundary? There are specific references to the setbacks from the street. So I question the use of adjacent here.
Well, my interpretation based on the law of roads is these are abutting properties subject to a public highway easement, so it is an adjacent property and the road is the zone line basically. So, and I will say that I personally have had cases where establishing agreement for purposes of appeals, for example, where we use the center line of the road as the measuring distance to establish being within 100 feet for purposes of agreement, and that's been recognized, and so that supports that. Now, even if we accept the applicant's 10-foot, their claim that the setback is 10 feet, then it would be our position that the site plan still does not comply, and I have the landscaping plan.
in your position, I guess, for it's not grandfathered in. Because what,
It's increasing the nonconformity. So what's there is grandfathered in or legally existing but non conforming.
is the proposed addition outside of the 60 feet?
Sorry?
You know if this proposed addition is outside of the 60 feet?
It's. Oh, you mean the addition? I don't know that. I think it is probably outside of 60.
That'd be my
That
guess.
actual addition is probably, however, they are adding some sort of a stairwell and landing, and that may or may not, depending on how you interpret the zoning regulations, that stairway or landing may or may not be exempted.
Okay, but your position on that, well, I'll hear the 10, we'll hear the 10 foot in a second, but your position is that this wouldn't apply if it was grandfathered in. If it was grandfathered in, then setbacks, it meets because of it.
It's legally existing but not conforming, right?
Commissioner Levy?
You know whether 12.7.62, which relates to side property line setbacks and feet. Is that the one that's controlling? I mean, we have street line setback, side, rear. Is this adjacent residence actually intended to be the front setback?
I think,
Corner lot.
first of all, I think it is maybe on the side, but it's also fronting on a street. And I note that the applicant, in the zoning grid, referred to this as the front line setback. It's, we have two front line setbacks, 40 some odd feet, and 39 feet, I think.
And the corner lot usually different?
I think that there's a corner lot, and Mr. Went can certainly chime in on this, but I think there's a corner lot exception in the residential regulations, but I'm
Commissioner Levy, sorry, were you talking 12.761?
Well, there's 12.7.6.2, which is side property
Yeah,
line.
okay, I was gonna
The
go,
question is whether 12.7.6.4 actually. We have front.
well, I guess the next question is one up, street line. Here we have 12.761 is street line setbacks. That not apply here?
So it would be my position that that adjacent residence district boundary, I think, creates an exception to those other standards in order to create some buffer going forward for residential properties. And this is once again, so that if you have a home that's located in a residential zone that borders on on one of these districts, you're not in a position where directly across the street from you, the building is 10 feet or directly on the street line, and it creates some setback for homes and sort of creates a buffer between commercial and residential uses.
That's a clarification question.
Just, can I throw one more log on the fire? Where it says, where it has this line that it says, the same as that of the residence district, there is no provision under the residence district regulations that refers to this order of the residence district. So it doesn't say in the residential district section 5, it doesn't create setbacks from a commercial district line. So that supports the notion that it is designed to incorporate the requirement on the other side of the line from the residential use.
When you are doing the 10 feet and the 60 feet calculation, what point are you using?
The property line.
The middle of the street?
No, I'm actually using the property line itself.
Which is then what?
Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. For purposes of this discussion, use the center of the road. And it's still, when I scaled it, the building was still 60 feet, was still within 60 feet of the center of the road.
I'm just trying to get a sense, because I normally, as you say, we use setbacks for, off a road,
Yeah.
and now you got me thinking in the middle of the road, and I'm trying to figure out what I should be using at that point, especially if you're saying that 0.4 is the superseding, I'll say, provision over the first one, 6.1.
Well, I've got either way, I don't know, this is something, I guess this is a departure point. First of all, I know that Mr. Fallon's gonna disagree, the staff will disagree with me, and that's fine. But if nothing else, I can predict the future on that, but if nothing else, this is probably a departure point for the
No, that's
commission to
fine.
maybe look at that regulation and think about it.
Why don't we, Commissioner Randolph with the clarification, you said you had the 10 feet, we'll get to that and then we can move on.
Yeah, so related to this, so you're Attorney Green, you're saying that because there are two different,
Can you speak a little louder? Sorry.
you're saying there's, since there's two different zoning districts abutting, that there's an additional setback requirement, is that correct?
I believe between commercial and residential, the commission wanted to put in some buffer and protection for residential districts.
So do we know specifically where the boundary is between the two different areas? Because I'm looking at this exhibit right here, and the property line is not the center of the street.
I agree.
We specifically know where the zoning district boundary is?
I think it's Attorney Green referenced that the boundary is in the center line of the street.
Well, I mean, he's saying that for purposes of making the adjacent comparison, but he,
Well, that's what the zone map shows.
okay,
I gave the commission a blow up of the,
no, that's fine. I'm sure Attorney Fallon will chime in as well, and then we'll have everything. What about the 10 feet there?
And so the setback then should be from the property line or from the center line of the street?
That's what I just asked, and we weren't sure.
Okay.
Well, you're not sure, but a point to be determined later, maybe.
okay.
Let's get to the 10 feet.
So let's talk about the 10 feet. So when you look at the landscape plan and you look at what is proposed, and I know that I'm familiar with situations, I'm at the ZBA all the time when people want to establish decks and sheds and outbuildings and all that sort of thing, and they need to get a variance to honor setbacks, and so clearly we regulate structures. And in this case, the applicant has identified that it, and you go to the key, you can see some of the features that it wants to put in, and for example, on the southern boundary of the property at number 2, you see that it translates on the back page to a preschool climber, which looks like some sort of a lean-to structure. And I think, first of all, the applicant did not include the setback lines on this drawing, whereas on the plan that I gave you, this plain plan, you can see the 10-foot setback line. However, we know that the parking spaces in front of the building are 10 feet, there's a 10-foot gap between, you can see the 10 feet on the this plain plan, and I'm pretty confident that feature number 2 is within the 10-foot setback. Similarly, it appears that those 2 trees along Hill Farm Road, for example, are 10 feet, within 10 feet of the center of those trees are within 10 feet of the property line, and you can see that the feature is feature number 10, which is a deck with steps, and so I think it's, while the applicant hasn't filled in the blank on that, I think it's a pretty fair inference that that is within 10 feet of the property line, and therefore that doesn't comply with even the 10-foot setback requirement. So the site plan,
Number 2 is the mud kitchen, right?
number 2 is, 2 would be preschool, okay, I see that.
See what I mean? It's a little line
All
there.
right. Yeah, all right, we'll leave that aside. I don't know whether that's regulated or not.
Structure. Well,
I'll take that back.
thank you. Commissioner Braun.
Yeah. The front of the building faces hillside, right, not Hill Farm? Are we
Well,
saying the
I
front?
guess what you would call the front of the building faces hillside. However, there's 2 streetlight setbacks.
Mhm. Okay. And I'm having trouble finding the parking spots that are on the front. Are those the ones on the far left where it says proposed asphalt parking lot?
9 on it. Right?
Those are 2 spaces,
Oh, they're sideways?
yes.
Okay.
You know what? Point them out to me, because now I'm not sure you.
They are right here.
on the lower left of the entire drawing, right near the,
Oh, you're down there.
Yeah,
I thought you were up by number 9.
no,
they're near the egress.
near the egress. Those are actually, 5 of them are technically in front of the building.
And where would
What
the
section?
so the 60 feet you're saying would be on both, just on Hill Farm, not on Hillside.
That's,
The Hillside also borders AAA.
well, no, that's interesting. Hillside across the street is a AA district,
Okay,
and that has a 50-foot setback.
okay. But if you draw the 60-foot from Hill Farm, where does that end up on this plan? Like,
I didn't draw it, but it's in the building. Well,
Okay.
once again, there is a center line drawn. That could be scaled on the plan, it could be scaled because there is a center line of the road.
oh, so you would just take that and figure out where 60 feet is?
Yeah.
Any structure that they're building in there,
Correct.
okay. And the other side though, that is in the NDD district on the. I
So
don't,
the other side of, directly across from the front of the building, as you're calling it,
where's the front facing Hill?
let's call the front of the building itself Hillside,
No, that's egress, not entrance.
even though that's egress.
Okay,
We'll call it, the front of the building is parallel to Hillside, and we'll call that the front of the building. Directly across the street is an AA district, and I put in the field card in the deed for 150 Hillside, and it shows that fronts on Hillside and it's in the AA district. And the zoning map reflects that as well. Thanks. All right, let's see where we are. Okay. 25.7.6, I'm just gonna throw it out there, and I didn't bring a copy of it, but you may wanna make note of it. 25.7.6 requires that the area required for a minimum setback from any residence district boundary line or use permitted in these zones shall be provided with a buffer consisting of fences, walls, or embankments in combination with other landscaping in such a manner as to screen the use from a view to a height of 5 feet at such boundary line, or shall be provided with evergreen shrubs and or trees. That's 25.7.6, and I'll leave that to the commission to interpret it because there is a fence. I do note that the fence is 4 feet. Picket fence along the road is 4 feet. And the regulation requires screening to a height of 5 feet. So that's again 25.7.6. I leave that to the commission. My client, Stuart Cagle, could not make it to the hearing tonight. He sent me his remarks to read into the record, and I ordinarily just submit this, but I think it's important, and I think I got an email from him today at 4:44. I think it is really important, so if you'll bear with me.
Obviously, I'd prefer it submitted, but I'm not gonna tell you can't because
I think just for the benefit of the public
Good
and.
call.
So this was what he was going to present this evening. Dear members of the commission, I have lived in Fairfield over 20 years and I recently attended my first public hearing ever regarding the proposed daycare facility at 161 Hillside Road. I do not know the process you use for making decisions. If I am to understand the lawsuit versus Bethel TPZ file that Attorney Fallon submitted, Attorney Fallon has warned that basically the lived experiences and information that local residents have provided cannot form the sole basis for your decision to accept or deny the Nessus application, but rather it must be based on expert testimony. Expert testimony, like legal services, is bought. Zoning regulations exist to protect homeowners and to allow the town to manage how development occurs. The purpose of the Neighborhood Design Business District zoning rules is to provide local neighborhoods with needed and desirable convenience goods and services in a manner which will not be detrimental to the surrounding residential areas. Uses permitted in this zone shall be limited to those which will primarily serve the local neighborhood and are consistent with the purpose for which this district was designed. I believe that the proposed daycare will be detrimental to the surrounding residential area. Inadequate parking will result in snarled traffic at the intersection and dangerous illegal parking on the street in residential yards or in adjacent commercial properties at peak commuter travel times. A traffic jam on I-95 or the Merit, a snowstorm, garbage pickup, lawn maintenance, a bus delay, elementary school buses run in town at their peak parking demand period, will only make the situation worse. I believe this because I've seen the pictures of the parking lot at the Nest facility in Brantford, and I see the intersection traffic disaster every day. Attorney Fallon would argue that what I've seen with my own eyes is not relevant, rather it is his bought experts' alternate reality that matters. Further, he argues that it is not incumbent upon the Nest to solve the traffic problems, and that the Nest will reduce traffic as compared to a bank. The Nest will argue that they have adequate parking and a plan to manage arrival times. In fact, adequate parking would obviate the need for scheduled arrival times and an unenforceable, untested schedule, which does not factor in the town's elementary bus schedules, gives me zero comfort. To prove this will work, I suggest he provide an expert. With its plan of keeping children outside for most of the day, the Nest is likely to generate a significant amount of noise. While the beauty of this noise is in the eye of the beholder, any potential real estate purchaser put off by this noise will have a detrimental impact on adjacent real estate values. But to prove this, I would have to hire an expert. I believe that the proposed daycare has no plan to primarily serve the local neighborhood. There is no plan in place which guarantees that spaces in the daycare primarily serve the local neighborhood. In fact, the abundance of neighborhood solutions makes this less likely. Dwight is roughly 5% of the town's elementary school population, while Greenfield Hill already houses roughly 14% of the town's daycare capacity. Further, the scarcity and value of high-quality daycare options means that the highest bidder from all surrounding towns is just as likely to drive through the intersection to be a client. To prove that it will primarily serve the local neighborhood, the Nest should have a concrete plan and provide an expert. The Nest plans on being the highest priced daycare in town. 72 lucky affluent families from somewhere will benefit, and 72 unlucky families relying on zoning laws to protect them will be forced to play parking roulette with the value of their homes and their sanity. As to expert testimony, I look forward to hearing from the Nest's parking schedule expert. But after the first hearing regarding 161 Hillside, I decided I wanted to respond to a large portion of the expert data that was provided by Hardesty and Hanover as it relates to site traffic generation. I hope that these questions or thoughts will help you distill fact from fiction. Attorney Fallon's expert asserted to Mr. Randolph that the ITE data was very reliable and accurate based on his experience. He asserted with confidence that a bank was not open before 9 a.m. would have 54 weekday trips between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. based on data from surveys completed over 10 and 20 years ago, using a variable that is statistically meaningless while willfully ignoring two ITE variables that do have statistical significance. As the bank was closed before 9 a.m., all 56 trips associated with the daycare would be new trips, and that's in bold. I have to just stop and say, I was really impressed that this is important based on the expert testimony that the applicant put forward. It's not open before 9 a.m. Let me go on. Attorney Fallon's expert cherry-picked bad data to support an argument that he's being paid to support. He chose the ITE data that supported his argument and then selected an average. In fact, the ITE has 3 different methodologies for calculating trip ends, using the variables of square footage, drive-in lanes, and employees. The 2 other methodologies have statistical significance in the AM, while his does not. Statistics doesn't rely on averages. It relies on formulas to show the link between a variable and the result that variable is attempted to predict. The formula is then assessed to determine just how predictive it is. There is limited to no predictive value of using square footage of a bank to determine trip volumes. If there was, the ITE would provide a formula to calculate it as they do with most of their studies. The formula would then have a score, R squared, to tell you how predictive it is. The following are the predicted trips using ITE formulas where applicable and averages when the predictive variable is less accurate. And there's a chart here, and I can hand this into the commission, and I will. Given that drive-in lanes and employees have demonstrated significance as a predictive variable in the AM, it is far more likely that they would have more predictive value in the calculation of PM trips. Using this logic and the highest number of predicted trips between the two, 27, daycare would add 30 trips a day in the afternoon versus Mr. Del Rio's assertion that the daycare would reduce afternoon trips by 34. Thus, the daycare would add over 86 trip ends per day at these peak periods, not reduced trips, as Attorney Fallon's expert attested. When bought expert testimony fails, it is the residents that pay the price. Please do not make an untenable situation worse. Stuart Cagle, P.S. Attorney Fallon's expert asserted that none of the accidents near the intersection since 2021 occurred near the entrance of the bank. I am not an expert, but it would be helpful to know when the bank closed. Sent from my eye. And do you want a copy of this?
I have a question. Could you explain at 9 AM? So the bank opens at 9 AM, so the comparison would be
There were no trips before 9 AM to the
Right.
bank. Is
So,
the
the
point.
50, so could you just explain the logic?
So we know that the intersection does not function well and it's substandard. And there was a comparison and the applicant, frankly, in their application frequently compared the traffic of the bank to daycare. But what Mr. Cagle is saying, besides the ITE analysis, is you can't use that analysis because the bank was not open during that 7 to 9 period when this facility would be receiving all of its traffic. Now, this would be a great moment, it occurs to me, because Mr. Monteleone are you here, Mr. Monteleone?
I am.
Okay.
Lower that, please. Lower that.
Can you, Mr. Monteleone, can you just give us one moment to adjust the volume because it's coming from the heaven.
Sure.
Can you comment on Mr. Cagle's statement that on how the fact that the bank was closed before 9 AM skews the analysis that the applicant used in its traffic study?
Sure. So when you're doing a traffic analysis and you want to look to see the delta between vehicles that were out on the road during the opening or during the functioning of the old land use versus the new land use. So when you look at that, you would deduct whatever number of trips come in and out of the bank during the same AM and PM peak hours as the proposed daycare center. So in this case, they use the ITE as a predictive measure as to what a normal bank would do during the AM peak hour before 9 AM. But in this case, the bank was closed. So you can't take credit for those trips because those trips didn't occur. So basically, you'd have to add all the AM peak hour trips that are being proposed by the daycare center as new trips into the traffic network.
Mr.
You can't
Monteleone,
take credit for something that didn't happen.
Mr. Monteleone.
Yes, sir.
Question. Last time you were here, I think your analysis focused on parking, and that's what I expected your opinion to be. And I tend to ask this question of the applicant during their rebuttal, but since you've brought it up, let's assume, frankly, because as you said, the bank's been closed the last few years and opens at 9, that all the trip generations from this new use are new. Did you do an analysis on how the streets would handle that traffic?
That's correct. I believe that would be the fairest way to disclose what the true impact of this new development would be on the
That's fair.
traveling public.
I'm asking, did you do that analysis?
I did not do that analysis, no.
I just want to make sure I understand scope.
Mr. Monteleone, following up on the chair's question, did the applicant do that analysis?
The applicant did not. The applicant screened out traffic analysis for both the AM and PM peak hours because of the amount of traffic that was projected from the previous land use, which was the bank. But now we've learned that the bank was not open during the AM peak hour, which changes things because now you can't take credit and a reduction in trips because those trips did not occur.
So, I mean, we'll hear from the applicant about that. I mean, they certainly made the argument about the net increase, but that, I don't think that means that they didn't do the full analysis on that, but I'll let them decide that.
Well, can I say one other thing, please?
Continue.
Sure. As part of their submission, there was no traffic analysis at the Hillside Road and Hill Farm Road intersection.
Anything further?
So they did a trip generation screening analysis, which screened out traffic analysis because the old land use basically muted the new trips that would be generated by the proposed daycare center.
Commissioner Levy, then Braun.
Mr. Green, obviously I'll have to spend some time looking at the setback analysis. But my question is, before I do that, this Chase Bank has obviously been there for a long time. The only proposed addition is a small corner in a small piece in the southwest section of the building. So have you considered whether or not the bulk of this would be a non-conforming use?
Well, there are structures that are clearly being added, those decks around the trees, and that's clearly in the setback on the north portion of the property, whether it's 10 feet or 60 feet. So clearly that's non-conformity. Like,
Parts of building, it's basically the same.
I did not frankly analyze which, like where there's a vertical expansion of the building, like that second floor portion, is that what you're referring to?
I'm looking at the floor plan, it's just the southwest corner, there's a small, I think it was a few hundred square feet proposed addition.
Yeah, I'm not.
You're right, that would require a variance.
I'm not suggesting, I don't think that area, that small square that's being shown is in setback, frankly, to be candid.
Yeah, so then the question would be whether or not the existing building is a non-conforming use if it goes back in time.
Well, once again, it is non-conforming, but it's legally existing because there's little doubt that it predated the adoption of the Neighborhood Design Business District in 1987.
Similarly, there were roughly, I guess, 7 spots in what we'll call the front of the building on Hillside, 7 parking spots. And assuming these 2 are considered in front, it's actually a reduction in the parking in front.
No, it's not, because it's in a different portion of the site. And section 28.1 says that you can't relocate or alter parking spaces except in full conformance with parking standards.
So you're considering these are not where the existing 7.
So reduction in nonconformities would be something that we talk about with Adolphson, which is before the ZBA, and not something we should talk about here.
Thank you.
Commissioner Braun.
Yeah, so I had a question somewhere, I think it was a Mr. Is it Mr. De Leon, or am I saying that right?
Monteleone.
Monteleone, sorry. I think it was in Mr. Monteleone's report that when you're driving in, I don't know if it's on the old or the new. When you're driving in from Hill Farm, and by the way, is Hill Farm north or is Hillside? Hill Farm is the north direction.
Farm is on the northern boundary of the property.
So that's north in that direction.
North towards Hill Farm.
Okay. When you're entering from Hill Farm and circulating around and exiting at Hillside, so parents are bringing their kids in that direction. Somewhere, I think in his report, he said, when you're entering, you cannot see all the parking spaces, so you don't know if you'll have a place to park, so it could cause you to circle around again and go outside and, circle around. I saw that in his report, I believe. I was wondering if you could address that or explain that. Is that based on the new plan or the old plan? Like, are there hidden spots that if somebody's trying to park, drop their kids off, or if a staff and they can't see that there's no spots on the end, like when you're exiting, then they have to enter Hillside Road, go back up to the intersection, go on Hill Farm Road and enter again. I think that's what could you explain that? Is that what you were?
Sure, yeah. So the parking lot is L-shaped. So the section to the east side is at the bottom of the L. So as
Can we
you
put that
pull
up on the
into
screen?
as you pull into the site, you can't see beyond the building where there are 7 additional parking spaces on that L closer to Hillside Road. So
And
a
we're
parent
talking about-
doesn't know.
Is it possible to, is that your screen or, oh, so people enter, it's only a one-way trip, so if you're
Correct.
entering and you want to park, so I'm expecting that parents have to park because these are little children and they have to bring the children, they have to park. So if there's no parking, where do they go? Do they
Right,
circle
well, that's
around
kind
or
of, that's really the basis for the fact that we don't feel that the site is large enough to accommodate all these movements, these parking maneuvers. So if all the parking spaces are taken in the initial, the first part of the lot, and they drive around to go see if there's a space at the back end of the lot on the 7 spaces, and there aren't any, then they have to circle back all the way around again. Or if there's a couple of spaces right at the beginning of the parking lot and they can't get to them, they go in and they can't make that turn, then they have to go around and look for parking spaces on the back side of the lot if there are none on the initial entry, and go all the way around and circle back around if there aren't any on that back side of the lot.
And the staff parking, so there's 15 staff that also have staggered, so the 15 teachers are coming in staggered between 7:30 and 9.
Right,
Administrators, I don't know which ones are the chefs.
right, so 12 come in before 8:30.
Mhm.
That's how they have it projected. So basically they're at 8:30, they're occupying almost half of the available spaces. So that's why there's an issue, because you only have wiggle room for 14 spaces. So if you have more than 14 people needing to park, then you have a problem, because then you have queuing or people circulating around the lot. And then back into Hillside Road, and then back onto Hill Farm Road, and then back into the site again.
So there's 28 spaces proposed, 15 staff, that leaves,
Well, the 2, you can't count the 2 handicap spaces because you just don't know if someone qualifies to park there.
say that again, I'm sorry.
The 2 handicap spaces,
Okay.
you can't count in an operational analysis because you just don't know if anybody qualifies to park there.
I see, so those would have to be left open unless it was a handicapped staff.
Correct, right. You can't assume that those spaces are gonna be occupied. Cause you just don't know the breakdown of who's coming.
If there's a bottleneck or a backup or something like that, are the cars gonna be backed up onto Hill Farm Road?
They could be, if there are parking maneuvers happening on those first 3 or 4 spaces as somebody pulls in, if more than 1 or 2 pull in, they could be back out into Hill Farm Road. Albeit it may not be for minutes, it may be for a minute, but it's still dangerous to have vehicles that queue up onto the road,
I just
to the public road.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
No.
That's what I'm saying, this site is very constrained and at its limit. It's really can't accommodate more than what it's trying to accommodate. And our feeling is that you're pushing the envelope so close to the edge that there's no guarantee that some of the things we're bringing up aren't gonna happen.
Mr. Monteleone, your resume, your CV is in the record, but how long have you been in the traffic business?
37 years,
How many projects and site plans have you been involved in planning over that 37 year period?
at least 100.
And in terms of, based on your education, training, and experience, you know, you use the phrase they could back up. Based on your education, training, and experience, do you have an opinion as to whether cars will back up into Hill Farm Road?
Yeah, because when I submitted previously the spreadsheet where I looked at vehicles coming to the site, there was actually a time period where there was 0 available spaces, and that was with with a normal distribution, meaning one per minute. If you have vehicles coming at a heavier percentage, meaning multiple vehicles coming into the site at the same time, there could definitely be a backup, especially, you know, around 8:30 in the morning. That's really that critical period where you have almost half the spaces occupied by the staff, that you could run out of spaces and have people not being able to get into the site.
And is your professional opinion that based on the sizes and the configuration of the lot, that will happen?
I believe so. It's a very confusing setup. And this particular site, I have a long experience with daycare centers. I actually did my master's thesis on daycare centers. So I have a lot of knowledge, and this particular site has a very high percentage of employees compared to the number of students. That's part of the problem.
Now, Mr. Monteleone, in your professional opinion, would the cars that are queued on Hillside Road end up stopping traffic? I'm sorry, on Hill Farm Road, end up stopping traffic on Hill Farm Road as a result of being backed up out of the site?
Yes, sir. There's a very narrow right of way.
And can you comment on whether that, based on your professional opinion, again, whether that is a safe condition or not?
It is not a safe condition.
And also, based on your education, training, and experience, have you been involved in configuring sites at intersections and the safety considerations of configuring sites?
Yes.
And can you comment on this site plan, which has a play lot located on the corner of Hill Farm and Hillside that is surrounded by a 4-foot wooden picket fence? Can you comment for the commission on what the safety concerns would be in locating a play lot for children on the corner of that lot with picket fences as the barrier?
Sure. So I would be very concerned, not only from the traffic engineering perspective, but as a parent, because if you have people who go through the stop sign or I guess the right word is misinterpret opposing vehicles, and there's a right angle crash, errant vehicles could very easily travel through the intersection and into this area where children are being kept for playtime. There's nothing to stop an errant vehicle from going through and along this this grass area and into that play area.
So obviously the applicant and the neighbors and this commission and everyone is concerned with safety of children using that site. So I'm going to ask you, it is your professional opinion that that configuration is safe or not?
I don't believe exposing the children that close to an active, heavily traveled intersection is a safe configuration without any level of protection whatsoever.
If anyone has questions.
Yeah, a fence, as you described, is not going to stop an errant vehicle after a crash.
Yeah, so have you seen this parking schedule thing that the Nest put out? I'm trying to understand it actually. They don't give a total, but they give like the different, it's something called the Nest parking schedule. I don't know if you could see this from where you are, but it's like a staggered way of family, teachers, admin, which I assume includes the 2 chefs, compared to the number of spaces. Like at 7:30, 5 family members will be assigned to arrive at 7:30, and then at 7:45, 10 more. 3 teachers will arrive at 7:30, 1 admin, so that's 9 people that arrive between 7:30 and 7:45. Then it says surplus 19. I don't know what that means, except that with 28 spaces, if you're using up 9, that mean there's 19 left? Yeah, that means there's 19 spaces left.
Right, so the difference between what they did and what I did in my analysis is that they looked at everything from a 15-minute period. So they said, okay, we're having 9 people come in, and then the site's gonna be cleared out, and there's gonna be the next 15 minutes. So that each 15 minutes was looked at independently. So 9 people come in, we have 28 spaces, so therefore you have 17 available spaces.
And at 15
That's
minutes
it.
later, 10 people come, but no more teachers or admin, so that leaves 14 being used, 14 left. But if you have a bottleneck, you know, with late people, they're not gonna
Correct.
be sent home. I think somebody pointed that out.
That's right.
They're
So
gonna,
the analysis that I put together was a minute by minute accumulation of for the entire time period of when teachers and when parents come. And mine was an even distribution, so it was the best case scenario for the operator. And even then showed at one point there were 0 available spaces. So that's why I was saying that if you bundle several people during the same minute, in some of the time periods, you're gonna have a situation where you have more people on the site than parking spaces.
and I don't know how they do the pickup or drop offs. I don't know if the parents park, take the kid out of the car seat, bring the child up to the door and into the classroom, or if there's a handler or a paraprofessional or an intern, somebody, one of the staff that comes out to greet you, but they don't have very many staff there. They only have 1 admin and 3 teachers. So I don't know, are they gonna be going out and bringing the kids in from the car? It doesn't matter. Does it make a difference?
They used I believe that in their presentation, the applicant described a 10-minute time period.
Yeah, I heard parking as well, but that's a question for the applicant.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Because he has a daycare experience, I was wondering if he had any.
Okay, I'll answer that. Different
sir,
establishments do it differently.
Mr. Montilio.
Excuse me?
No, it's okay. I don't need to hear your experience with other applications, so we'll ask the applicant about the specific.
Sure, absolutely.
All right,
Okay, does it make my question was, does it make a difference to you how the transfer gets done? In terms of bottlenecks or backups, does one take longer than the other? That was really my question.
The way I'll just say this, the way that it's set up right now, it's not set up to do that.
To do what?
Because then people would have to come park in a space, someone would have to come and meet them, or they have to take the child out and meet them at the curb and then go back into the car. So it gets a little clunky.
I'm sorry. Does it matter? Does it make a difference between the parent bringing the child in or somebody else coming and getting does it make a difference time-wise for bottleneck purposes?
It may make it a little bit more efficient if it was set up properly.
Okay,
But the thing that I noticed when I did my research is that a lot of the parents want to go in and talk to the teacher, that the child had this issue or that issue, or they wanted to talk to them, especially when they're really young. That here, this is the bottle you need to give to them at this time and that time. So there's communication that needs to happen between the teacher and the parent, more so than just handing them over and getting right back in the car.
And where are the entryways to the building in relation to all the parking spaces? Are there multiple entries or do they have to walk around to the front? Or is there one in the back where the parking?
One in the back. That's what the testimony was, and the
I'm sorry.
primary entrance is there.
You say that again?
Primary entrance is, if you're looking at the building on top of the building, the plans.
So if north is to the right on Hill Farm, that means west is where the big parking lot is. That's where most people will park, I'm assuming. Is that where the entrance is to the building? I can't really tell from this diagram.
Yes.
Okay. That's good anyway. Okay, thank you.
I had one final question, but any others, then we can move on. My main question, I guess, with parking is this. As of, let's just put aside your the 2 in the front. You had an issue with however many, whatever you saw, I thought you said it was 2
well,
off of,
there's 2 in front directly, and then there's 3 that are.
all right, put aside those right now. And the shortness of them potentially, put that aside. If they meet the parking requirements, notwithstanding your Mr. Montillo arguments about operational, I have a basis to deny them if they meet the parking requirements.
There is no direct parking requirement set in for it.
I thought there was one, but maybe I'll look at it again. Commissioner Harrison.
I have a question for Mr. Monteleone.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm wondering, are you familiar with ITE?
Absolutely. I belong to it.
Okay. Is the ITE data, is that only self-reported by ITE members or other people outside the ITE community, if you will?
So the way it works, and I'm in the book in a few places where I've provided data. The ITE looks for its members and anyone who's a practicing traffic engineer to provide data as they collect it for their particular studies. They're always looking for information and data to supplement their trip generation manual, and they come out with a new manual, every 3-4 years or so with new information, especially for land uses that are new. Obviously there are different land uses that keep popping up. Back in the 80s, they didn't have anything for video stores, and then obviously there were tons of them, so then there was tons of data. So they're ever evolving and collecting data, as you move forward. They try their best to make it as comprehensive and as detailed as possible.
Okay, so it's only self-reported by ITE members. I couldn't give them data of my, road, my area of town. Is that correct?
I mean, they'll accept data from everyone, but you need to show how you collected it. I mean, there's a certain process by which you need to report it, and you need to submit the background information and how so all the procedures of how you collected the data. So it's not where anybody can just send them something and they would publish it. It's got to go through some level of scrutiny.
Thank you.
Professional scrutiny.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Randolph.
Mr. Monteleone, I got two specific questions. So you were mentioning that the dimension along the west part of the parking varied from 16 foot to 18 foot long and 9 foot wide.
Mr. Attorney Green did.
Oh, Attorney Green did. Mr. Monteleone, what is the dimension for a compact parking space?
It can be as small as from about 8 feet to 16 feet, but those are very few and far between. Typically, you have compact spaces when you have a big parking garage and thousands of cars there, where you can put smaller vehicles. When you're looking at a small site like this that has less than 30 spaces, typically you do not have spaces allocated for small vehicles.
Thank you for that, but I'm just asking what the dimension is for a compact space.
They can be as small as like 8 by 16.
9 by 16 would be a compact space.
I mean, yeah, you could say that. But
Size?
the typical size of a parking space, depending on the municipality, is 9 by 18 in most jurisdictions. Sometimes they have 8.5 by 18, but that's rare. It's more 9 by 18.
But 16 feet is
it's small. Yeah, it's small.
It's within standard.
He did, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So the second question relates to a topic you raised last time on the turning radius of the entries, where you said that it was tight.
Yes, that's correct.
Is there enough dimension to correct that based upon your general view?
It's hard to say, because when you're doing site plan, you have lot coverage issues. There's all kinds of other zoning regulations that you have to take into account when you do it. So everything's got to fit like a glove. So I can't really speak, since I didn't do the actual site plan. I can't speak to where there are tolerances in the actual site plan itself that would permit a wider apron for getting in and out of the site.
Yeah, I think you were saying last time that the radius, if I understood correctly, the radius for the entry was tight specifically. And that's something that you I think we're suggesting needed to be reviewed. If I may.
Right, it was basically where the wheel was making contact with the curb, based on the auto turn analysis that was done by the applicant.
Believe
Attorney
that,
Green.
For an SU-30,
Attorney Green, go
small
ahead.
truck.
I believe that that was addressed by the applicant in their revised submission.
Okay.
So you'll see a new drawing on that.
Thank you.
On the parking spaces, the Fairfield zoning regulations don't recognize compact spaces. They're not, there's no provision for it, and to the contrary, the spaces that don't, I would urge the commission to exercise discipline and not accepting or accounting for spaces that don't fully meet the 9x18 standard. That's what your regulations require. And as I pointed out, it's reiterated in 28.1 and 12. Well, the other section within the design, 12.10.3, I believe. So just to wrap up.
Please, thank you.
Just to go full circle on to these soft standards, and I know we're gonna quibble with the applicant over some of these issues that have been raised, but going to 27.4.1. Again, it says location, type, character, and size and use in buildings and structures shall be in harmony with and conform to appropriate and orderly development of the town and the neighborhood, not hinder or discourage appropriate development and use of adjacent property or impair its value. You heard from my clients at the last hearing that they can't get out of their driveways in the morning under current conditions. Therefore, adding some 56 cars in the morning commute that are totally new trips can only worsen that situation. Therefore, without getting further into it, certainly that would hinder or discourage the use of their property directly across the street. And I would suggest impair its value, and I think that's something that Mr. Cagle touched on in his letter. And certainly a finding that should be made by this commission. Significantly though, 27.4.3 refers to the adequacy of the streets to carry prospective traffic. Provision shall be made for entering and leaving the site without creating undue hazard or traffic or congestion, and adequate off-street parking and loading shall be provided. So let's talk about it just for a second. Here you have a facility that's going to be operating from 7 to 6. And site is tight. There is not enough no parking standard for day nurseries, but no question. And you have now the professional opinion of Mr. Monteleone that the site will not work. And once again, there is zero room for error. But let's add in something we haven't talked about. There's no loading space. Where are supplies? Where are those farm to table vegetables? Where are food, supplies, all of those things, fuel, all of the things, deliveries, UPS trucks, FedEx trucks? Where are they landing on this site and when? And that is completely unpredictable. So you can imagine a purveyor or a delivery person stopping on this site and it will be chaos. There is no provision. It was not addressed by the applicant how that will be handled. And so there's no question that this plan will not work. It simply won't work. The off-street parking is not adequate. And it does create traffic hazards. It does create an unsafe condition. And it says 27.4.7 speaks to creating no nuisance or have a detrimental effect and that sort of thing. And you have expert testimony, and I don't think it's too hard to figure that having a playground located on a corner of a very poorly functioning intersection. And you heard testimony, and you can accept testimony specifically as to this site, as to speeding cars. We've heard repeatedly people get up and talk about cars flying through the stop sign. Not okay with that. So once again, the soft standards does vest, particularly armed with expert testimony, does vest some discretion, significant significant amount of discretion based on the expert testimony provided in this commission in deciding this application under those standards. It does not meet technical standards. And finally, I will say, while the applicant may suggest we're nitpicking on the length of the spaces, or we're nitpicking on the location of the spaces, or on some of these setback issues, there is no close enough when it comes to the technical standards. It either complies or it doesn't. And if it doesn't comply, then you cannot grant a special exception. So I am way over my time. And I want to thank the commission for your thoughtful questions and for your patience and for hearing us. And once again, my clients and I urge the commission to deny the application.
Thank you, Attorney Green.
Attorney Russo?
We'll go to Attorney Russo then, yeah. Attorney Russo, you there?
Yes, Chair.
Where's yours?
Thank you. Chair, member, Chris Russo with Russo and Rizzi LLC, offices at 10 Sasko Hill Road in Fairfield. Here on behalf of the property owner, 1960 Bronson Road, the Whole House Group LLC, and the owner of 129 Hillside Road, 129 Hillside Road LLC. Attorney Green touched on a lot of points, so I'll try to be brief. Obviously, I'm usually presenting on the applicant side to this commission. My client is pro-development, and I think like a lot of the people who spoke at the last hearing, the members of the public, we are supportive of the use. However, my client, like many of the neighbors, has concern about the intensity of the use and development here, and its impact on the neighborhood and the NDD itself that is in this area. You know, NDDs are constantly on a knife's edge. I would say they are probably one of your most fragile districts, is the word I would use. Because for commercial uses, they don't get the foot traffic that the DCD or the CDBD corridors do. They don't have that benefit. And they are basically trying to quietly and unobtrusively offer commercial uses to nearby residents without impacting the surrounding residential neighborhoods. Some NDDs, like Southport's NDD, have on-street parking. Some have close access to mass transit, Southport being another example of that. The Reef Road NDD to a bit of a lesser extent, but does have close access to mass transit. The Greenfield Hill NDD is out on an island compared to some of those other NDDs. There's no on-street parking. There's no proximity to mass transit. It has to handle its parking and traffic on the properties that constitute it. So parking is a premium there. I can tell you some commercial properties in this NDD, including my clients, share parking through easements to make it work. And you know, I think this kind of goes back to Commissioner Braun, the question that you had just asked, which is if there's not enough parking on the site and there's no on-street parking, and they're not going to be parking on the residential properties, obviously, they're going to be parking on the commercial properties there. And again, these are properties, some of them that already share parking. It's a premium down in that NDD. So it's very tenuous. And I think if you know the decades of history of this area and the commercial uses there, you know how it's struggled with retaining and supporting commercial tenants. And adding a use, and that's really what my client is concerned about, is that this use and development as proposed is just too much in too small a site. And its parking overflow will not go onto the street, but onto the commercial properties. And it will also impede traffic flow. It's just too much, and I think counter to some of your regulations. Attorney Green went into the setbacks, which I agree with, so I won't repeat that. But I also think if you look at section 12.6.4 of your regulations for your design business districts, And its first sentence states, all portions of the lot not used for building and other structures or for paved driveways, sidewalks, or off-street parking and loading areas shall be suitably landscaped. And so if the playground areas are not buildings and structures, they're not off-street parking, they're not paved driveways, then they should be landscaped. And if they are being considered structures, then they should be appropriately set back as Attorney Green highlighted in his arguments. Setbacks, the standards should be applied to them. The playground areas can't skirt between not being a structure and not being landscaping as required under your regulations. And I would say I'll echo what Attorney Green stated about where property lines are located. If someone is across the street or a zone is across the street, it's abutting that property. It goes to the middle of the road, and Attorney Green brought up that case he was involved in. I was the one on the losing end of that case with him. Attorney Green won that argument. The judge upheld his argument that it goes to the middle of the road. So the properties, the zone that's on the opposite side of Hillside and Hill Farm Road is abutting, and those setbacks, those additional setbacks for bordering a residential district, I believe should apply. And I think when you look at the site and you think about those, again, what Attorney Green saying that, there's houses, located that would then have, a commercial building, and in this case, a playground right up against the property line. When those houses, are set back, it just doesn't fit in. The purpose of that regulation is to try to keep and to protect these residential properties. So I think that would be appropriate buffering for the site, rather than these playgrounds which are proposed directly on property lines and directly on street corners. And I just had one more point, and it's something again that Attorney Green brought up, but because it's just a highlight, because the comment was made equating this use to other uses in the NDD zone, and your regulations specifically separate day nurseries from the majority of uses permitted. You have a significantly higher standard for the day nursery compared to the other majority of uses. And Attorney Green highlighted those increased standards. There's a reason that use is held to those heightened standards, because it's a use that is known to have impacts outside its site. That's why the standards references nuisance, privacy, and tranquility. It's to ensure that you have the ability to control impacts outside the site. And I think those standards are there to protect for an application like this, where the site is clearly being packed to the gills. The playgrounds are located on street corners and right up against property lines. The applicant submitted a parking schedule in 15-minute increments because the site can't handle the traffic it's generating. And while the schedule is all well and good, as a parent of three young kids myself, parents with young children are not exactly reliable as to their timeliness. And I could certainly see the schedule quickly falling apart. And these vehicles, again, stacking up, blocking the roadway, and these patrons using other commercial lots to park, because this site can't satisfy the parking for the intensity of the development that's proposed. Chair and Commissioners, I really don't have much more beyond that and what Attorney Green said. But again, it's, as the neighbor said, a lot of them said, it's not the use, it's just that this development is proposed is, it's just packed in there. And whether it's the playground, the traffic, the parking, it's too much for this site. And with that, those are my comments. I'm happy to answer any questions, but those are the extent of my comments.
Commissioner Braun.
I have a question. Could you repeat this? When you started speaking, you gave us a regulation number, 12 point something, 12 point.
Right, it's 12.6.4.
What is that for again? I don't have them all.
That's landscaping. It's the landscaping standard for your designed business district. And it's the first sentence of that regulation. And it states that all portions of the lot not used for buildings and other structures or for paved driveways, sidewalks, or off-street parking and loading shall be suitably landscaped. So I think it puts these playgrounds in a catch-22 because it's clearly not landscaping. And this regulation is saying it should be landscaping. Otherwise, it's a building or structure. And if it's a building or structure, then it should be appropriately set back. You
And by
know,
setback, that's the Hill Farm Road or the Hillside Road, one has maybe a 50-foot based on you and Attorney Green's legal analysis of where the abutting neighbor property line is for this for
Right.
setback purposes, or 60 feet on the Hill Farm side.
yeah, with the one that abuts the
AAA and double A.
AAA and then the AA standard for a street line setback, correct? And then on the westerly on the westerly property line of this site
That's where the
is
big parking lot
also
is.
AA, is also AA.
Oh, so on the north is Hill Farm, so on the west would be, are there neighbors behind? I thought there was another commercial building on the other side of Chase Bank. I guess-
That's on the southerly end. On the western end, I think the property 799 Hill Farm Road, that property is located in the AA zone. So it's got it on 3 of its sides, this site has residence zones.
Okay, I didn't realize it was 3 sides. Oh, but there's no
The
road.
southern side is the only side that abuts the NDD.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Say that again, I missed that.
The southern side of the site
Right.
is the only property line that abuts the NDD.
And the west side, which would be the side where the longer parking lot is that's being proposed. There's no street there between, are the neighbors right up against the property or is there a road? back?
Yes, they're right up against the property line there.
Okay, so that's. Okay, so whatever, I don't know what structures are being built there, it's hard to tell, but you're saying that would be, is that AA or AAA, the one on the on the west?
AA, yeah, it has, you know what, I might be able to,
Let's say see a play area, but I don't know if that, I don't know where the neighbors,
let me see if I could just pull it up quick. I don't know if you could see that
hard to tell from this.
from your end. Yeah, here's 161, it's dead in the middle. To the left is 799 Hill Farm Road, which is in the AA,
I'm sorry, which color are we looking at?
right here, this one that's highlighted right here. Can you see that one?
Where's Hill Farm in that depiction?
Hill Farm's right to the north of it here.
Is that to the right or the,
No, right here. Hill Farm runs
that's Hill Farm, okay.
right here.
To the left and the west is a pale green area.
Yeah, the pale green area is AA. And that's also on the right-hand side, which is on the opposite side of Hillside, which runs north-south. And then to the north, on the opposite side, Hill Farm, the olive green is AAA zone.
What's the pink area?
The pink area is NDD. So there's the sites in the NDD, and then these properties to the south are all in the NDD. And then there's another, the former Marsh Animal Hospital that's kind of diagonal there.
I
that
see.
you can see there.
But so the outline in blue, that's other neighbors then on the left?
Yeah, that's residential neighbors. Yeah, it's 799 Hill Farm Road. They're in the AA district.
And what is, could you just name this thing that you're showing us? Is this in the public hearing record or is this something from the town website?
It's your GIS map with the zoning overlay.
Okay, thanks.
Questions? Last question, Attorney Russo, for you, with setbacks, is this just a grandfathered property for setbacks?
Well, the existing building is, but any of the additions are not. And then again, it goes this question of the playground. I mean, if it's not, and the playground itself has structures within it, in my opinion. But the playground is obviously entirely new, both of them. And if it's not structures, it's not paved area, then it should be landscaped. But it's clearly not landscaped, which in my opinion, I think it's a structure and it should be set back. So that's not, the playground's not pre-existing non-conforming. And any structures that are being added to the existing building are not pre-conforming. It would, in my opinion, be subject to the setback requirement.
I wouldn't, well, okay, thank you. Anything, is it quick?
Mr. Went, or playground structures,
So let's,
Speak up a little louder.
we can get into that later,
Okay, I'm
let's
sorry.
finish, that's okay, just wanna
Yeah.
keep things moving here. Commissioner Levy.
And you put a set of swings within a setback.
No, I mean, technically it's a structure.
Thank you.
I mean, I understand it could be a temporary structure, it might not be fastened down. But the way the reg reads, I think it's either gotta be landscaping or it's a structure. I mean, it's not a paved area, so.
this is, that's the same question.
No, I know, but we're asking, then ask them, we can get our,
Mr. Russo, is there a definition of playground equipment in our current zoning ordinance?
Not that I found, I only found, I think it's one reference to playground in the regulations. And that has to do, I believe with related to single family dwellings. It's the only mention of playgrounds I've seen in the whole regulations.
thank you, Attorney Russo.
Thank you.
Any member of the public? Come on up, if anybody in person, we'll start up first, then next, ma'am. All right. Just give your name, your address, comments germane. If you've already spoken, I'd ask, unless it's something new, not to repeat yourself, but
I didn't speak.
no, it's fine. Thank
Okay,
you.
my name is Elizabeth Clark. I reside at 684 Hill Farm Road. I'm right next to Dr. Marsh's former animal hospital and right before the four-way of Hill Farm Road and Hillside Road, where the former Chase Bank was. My backyard also aligns on Hillside Road, which is also next to Dr. Marsh's former animal hospital. It'll be 26 years in January that I've lived at my residence. I'm also a lifelong resident of this town, born and raised here. I love this community. Over the many years, I have witnessed the increased traffic flow on these roads. Not only are there cars, but commercial vehicles, landscaping trucks with large trailers, Mack trucks, large tractor trailers, and so on. It's not a few, it's hundreds a day. It's not only early morning and late day, but it's all day. I myself, last Thursday on my front porch, counted 117 cars within 14 minutes. This is not an anomaly, this is standard. If this doesn't open your eyes to the reality of the seriousness of this, I don't know what will. And school hasn't even started yet. I have certainly put up with my share of minor annoyances living close to the business district. But a daycare with 72 children plus their staff is way more than any one person who owns a piece of property here should ever have to put up with, times 1,000. I'm not a complainer, but this hits hard and it's very serious, especially when it comes to the safety of the children. The noise is going to be nonstop, and whether it's 10 kids outside or 72, you're still going to have that high noise level. I've heard birthday parties going on 4 doors down and you hear it all day long. There is nothing wrong with that. That's what children do and are supposed to do. For the people in this area who want to sit outside, enjoy a cup of coffee, a meal, whatever, it's absolutely not acceptable that we have to endure that. Nonstop, Monday through Friday from 7 to 6 p.m. That's 11 hours each day. It also states in the charter that any business that comes and distracts the quiet peacefulness of this neighborhood is not to be permitted. Say it again. The charter states that any business that comes in and distracts the quiet peacefulness of this neighborhood is not to be permitted in. Over the weekends, I can absolutely assure you, children and their families occupy the playground on that property. It's a fact. It literally happens in every single park in Fairfield. Police get calls to St. Thomas Church alone as a constant issue with kids congregating. I'm not opposed to a daycare. I'm all for small businesses, but this is just not a safe and appropriate four-way intersection area to put a daycare. It's just not the spot. There are other safer and more appropriate areas for this daycare. 161 Hillside Road cannot, and I'll repeat, cannot sustain any more congestion or noise. It just can't. I question why you would even consider putting young children into this scenario, which is absolutely disastrous, selfish, and simply not right. We, me, and I think I can speak for my neighbors, live this every single day. And again, I question this. Anybody driving by in their right mind would never look at that dilapidated bank on a busy four-way intersection and say, that's the perfect spot for a future daycare of 72 kids. I feel there could be a lack of transparency here because it just doesn't make any sensible sense. People I've talked to laugh and say, are you kidding me? By the way, when the former Chase Bank was in operation, there was not a high volume of cars frequenting the bank at all. I can attest to it because I saw and drove by almost every day, and I did use this bank. There was maybe at the most 2 cars lined up at the drive-through, and never ever were the cars out to the street, or would it disrupt or affect the flow of traffic. The parking lot was never full ever. The person that stated the car volume of this bank was not accurate. It's not true. I continually witness speed as vehicles accelerate from that four-way. I spend a lot of time on my front porch, I know. I have videos to show not only the speed, but the volume. I actually took one last Wednesday at 6:59 a.m. and all the cars were lined up. And I have a video, it's 3 minutes and 55 seconds long. I couldn't send it to you, but it just shows the high volume of cars. And I have several other videos and people accelerating from the four-way going up Hill Farm Road. Can
we assist with getting the video over, or how does that work?
I have a lot of them I can try to get.
I'd like to see them.
You want me to show it to you now?
It's up to the chair,
Watch it?
but I don't know.
If there's a way of getting them to us by thumb drive, that would be the way to handle it, if you
Okay.
can email them.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. What's my train of thought where I was?
It's okay, take your time.
Okay, over the weekends, I say this? Over the weekends, I can absolutely assure you, children and their families will occupy the playground on that property. It's a fact. It literally happens in every single park in Fairfield. Police get called, I already said that, didn't I?
Okay.
Not opposed to the daycare, small business. But this is not a safe and appropriate four-way intersection area to put a daycare. It's just not the spot. Okay, I talked about the bank. I continuously witness the speed, volume, I'm speaking about. Okay, I continually witness speed as vehicles accelerate from that four-way. I spent a lot of time on the front porch, I know, and then I said the videos. Okay, we live this every single day. The speed and volume I'm speaking about is real, it's not fabricated. I witnessed many accidents where I've called 911. I can't even count the many accidents at that four-way. At the four-way, Hill Farm starts to slope down. When it's been icy, cars cannot stop there. I know it's happened to me. Not long ago, a police car crashed and ended up in the woods across from the bank, rounding the corner to go up Hillside Road, which is 161 Hillside Road, at a very high speed. I know because I heard the crash and I called 911. The fire trucks come down the hill on Hillside when they have calls from their station up in Greenfield Hill. They go across Hill Farm when there are calls. Ambulance and police speed through these roads during emergencies. We have lost 2 innocent lives on our surrounding roads, which is too many. The parent that spoke last week stating that parents of young children being the best drivers and safest is fabricated. In truth, they are probably the most dangerous. There are 2 specific reasons. Number 1, small children are always running late, missing a shoe or forgetting something in the house, not wanting to go to school. The way you might make up for it is and driving faster than you normally would. Secondly, there are so many distractions going on in the backseat of the car, fighting with a sibling, wanting more goldfish, and it just becomes a circus and impossible to focus on the road. It's just a fact. I think we've probably all been there at one point or another. In my previous letter to you, I did state it is a disaster waiting to happen. Why in God's name would you put a daycare and a playground right at a four-way intersection in the most busy intersection? A fence or no fence, it is set up for a complete disaster. I can assure you more accidents will happen. It's just a matter of when. It's just not the right spot. This is so serious, and please trust in what we are all trying to say, myself and my neighbors. I can assure you more accidents will happen. This is so serious, so please trust in what we are trying to convey here. Me, and my neighbors know we live this every day, and please trust in this. And I'm not opposed to the daycare again. This is just not the appropriate spot, and I can't stress it enough. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Can I ask her a question?
Yes.
I wasn't here last time, so I was remote. I didn't hear a lot of things. I've written a letter, I don't know who, but indicating that this is some kind of a shortcut through, like for commercial traffic going from somewhere to somewhere. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, because
What is that about? Because I don't live in that area.
Come from Black Rock Turnpike, Bridgeport. They come all the way around, take Black Rock Turnpike, they cut across, they go
Why
up.
don't they go way over to there? Where are they going to?
They cut across because if you go on Hill Farm, you make a right on Bronson and a left on Hull's Farm, it goes right down to Westport. So people are cutting through to get to Westport or get onto 95 or the Merritt. But it's just, I can't explain it, but it's just, it's chaos.
Okay.
And to put a daycare and a lineup of cars in that area is just, it's a setup for a disaster.
Thank you for that. Thanks.
Chairman, just one technical point. I mean, no discourtesy to the speaker, but I also want to make sure the record's fair to my client. The matter of the thumb drive, I mean, I think it's everybody's hope, although not certain, that this hearing would close tonight. So
I thought a thumb drive might be easy. I mean, I was gonna close subject to, I guess, at this point, a thumb drive with the videos, unless you want her to show it to us now.
I really don't know, I don't wanna burden the commission, but you can understand my
I understand wholeheartedly.
something coming into the by the same token, it may be a moot point because I have a lot of ground to cover.
Which is fine, but I was trying to just move things along. I'm happy if there's a video, if you think us watching it now is more appropriate, I just was
I
thought.
think we should see it. I mean,
That's
and
fine.
then, we may not have a comment
How
on
do I
it.
set it up? I mean, I
Then
can,
it's part of the record.
That's fine, but I mean, the problem is, I'm not gonna have a copy of it, I'm gonna have a thumb drive later. So I can see it now, but I'm still gonna get a thumb drive later.
Again, and no discourtesy to the speaker,
No, I did-
but in fairness to my client, if this hearing were to close tonight, I wouldn't want the thumb drive delivered tomorrow to become part of the evidence of the record, when it wasn't part of the evidence of the record.
Well, here's I mean, listen, the point is, if she wants to put it in, she's given the expression that she wants to put it in. So I was gonna allow it in, because there's nothing I'm not gonna stop that, obviously. I thought the easiest way to handle it was get a thumb drive later, we can look at, we can watch it at our leisure. Now, if you feel, cause just keep things moving and, next application, all that jazz. If you wanna watch it now so we can all see it, I mean, she's still gonna submit the thumb drive later because I can't worry about that now.
How long is it?
That's a fair question.
I have a lot of videos, but this particular one is 3 minutes and 55 seconds, but I mean,
How
I
many
have
videos do you have, ma'am?
shorter ones to show at different times. I mean, I've just,
No, that's fine. How about this?
and I have car racing going 100 miles an hour uphill.
Is it fair, Attorney Fallon, for her to show a sample of them, but not
I
they're
don't
all
want
coming
any
in.
way to limit her showing whatever she wants or having or deprive the commission of anything it, wants to see or should see.
This is my point, though.
I'm just concerned about it coming in after the hearing's closed.
Well, again, she's referenced it. I'm doing it so we can move things along. If you want to see them now, I mean, I'm more concerned about you at this point because they're coming in. Whether I see them all today and get them all tomorrow, or I see some today and I get them all tomorrow, or I see none and I get them all tomorrow. Mindful, I'm gonna watch them all. We are all gonna watch them. It's a matter of what your preference is.
I think if they're going to be reviewed by the commission as part of the record, they should be made part of the record
I
during
can,
the public hearing.
Come on up. Let's come here. I have an idea.
Can we mirror the screen?
Yeah, maybe the screen.
Why not?
I can do
I don't know how that
I
works.
can do a short.
Somebody else with it?
It's not like a whole TV.
Huh?
On my front porch.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Attorney Fallon, come up here. I
You can-
see,
You can click, these are all that I took.
these are the ones you want. I see one,
Well-
2, 3,
Well,
4.
you don't have to put them all, it's just me.
I understand, but look, ma'am, and I don't mean this meanly,
No,
I'm
no, no,
sorry.
no.
I know I'm being snippy. I had a long day myself.
That's it.
It's your right to put in what you want.
Okay,
And
I
I
was just
want-
gonna,
And I want you to have that right, and Attorney Fallon does too. It's just a matter of how we do it. And I'm happy to, we can't put them up on there, I don't think, which is fine. We don't have that might be something to put in the hopper.
How big are they? I mean, you can try to email them to me.
I see, hold on, I see a 3-minute one, I see a minute one, I see 30 seconds, 50 seconds, 49 seconds.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a suggestion?
Please.
Which has a good side and a bad side?
Are you not gonna close? Let me ask you that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're reaching the point where we.
Well, why don't we do this? Let me get through public comments. Finish with public comment on this hearing.
More questions.
Yeah, and then we
Well,
have,
obviously, every rebuttal. I know, you have questions to rebuttal.
so maybe we should wait and see, because if the hearing doesn't close tonight, because my rebuttal has to be completed or start, then this becomes a moot question. Then
Here's my question, here's my thing, I think I have one person, let me ask you this. Procedurally, any member, I'm sorry, you're getting text, any member of the public in person that wishes to be heard? I saw 1, 2 more, anybody else? I saw somebody online maybe.
so you're not gonna have a problem.
This is what,
Mr. Harrison has questions.
No, I
I have a
understand.
few for your
Well,
traffic engineer.
Well, here's
one.
my question to you, if I finish with public comments and I get done with the public comment
Mhm.
and I close public comment, do you wanna wait till the next time to start, or do you wanna start tonight?
I'm gonna need about, to do everything that I need to do to complete the record, I'm gonna need at least an hour and a half.
So my thought is finish public comments. Mr. Nguyen, help me out too. Finish public comment tonight. Maybe adjourn this hearing, so he can come back the next time for rebuttal, and then start the other application.
Well,
I know, is that too much?
yes, in anticipation of being fortunate to finish this tonight, we just advised the other applicant that we're not gonna start their
Oh,
application
that's
tonight.
helpful, okay. never mind.
So
We'll go for it.
I think we should go as far as we can get. If the rebuttal doesn't complete and we roll over, so be it.
That's fine.
I don't know if there's anything in these videos that you're gonna see that hasn't already been described verbally that's gonna,
Probably, but she wants to put the videos in,
and that's fine.
and she
So
has
we
the
can
right to
take
do
those,
that.
but I don't know what's,
Why don't we do this? Can the commission come behind me and watch the 3-minute one?
So we're not getting to excite
I
tonight?
agree with you, it's not, no.
Doesn't sound like we're gonna
that's a
excite.
good idea.
If you don't mind, I'll take it. Attorney Green,
What she shows should be what's on the thumb drive.
No, I'm not leaving. I can't leave.
Okay,
and this will be put on, this is gonna be, Attorney Green, I know, cause he has
Second.
Just do it.
We're not gonna start here for excited.
Well, is there anybody here for public comment, for public that's here for Exide? Next application, Porsche dealership. We're not getting to it, as I just learned, so thank you, go ahead.
Why don't we?
I'm sorry.
This is a minute, this is a minute and 25 seconds. It's at 7:39 AM. Okay, and that's on my front porch.
I would put the thumb drive, if this is gonna hold open for part of my rebuttal, then I can go look at it. If I wanna comment on rebuttal, I can do that.
It's just,
Well, that's what I wanted.
it's just monotonous.
Rather than you all looking at it
I
now.
just suggested.
If the hearing stays open,
You're
might
not close to them.
I'm going back to what I wanted. I'm going back to what I wanted to. What we'll do, ma'am, is this.
And you'll hear.
All those that you want to submit to the public record, get them on a flash drive, or however you need to
Just screaming.
Yeah, that will be part of the public record, and then we can. That got back all right? Okay.
Huge, excited is with you.
You're a great guy, I just got laughing.
You're so close. Trying to
All
tell
right.
them to spend more time.
So, just to read, we're back to where I started. Spoke to our last member of the public. She will submit all the videos that she wants to staff via flash drive or whatever, however means that she wants to submit.
Email.
Tomorrow, the next day, whatever it is,
Mirror.
it'll be part of our public record at that point. If we close tonight, it'll be subject to Attorney Fallon may not, which is fine too. Let's move on.
Yeah, I just wanna say, I said that because after the public hearing closes, we cannot get any more evidence. So that's why I wanted to make sure you had that opportunity.
Thank you.
I wanna be clear on that.
Unless we keep things open, I mean, that's what we've done in the past where we close the public hearing to receive records later.
So this will be submitted to us, posted on the website, in other words?
Yes, submitted to us and then posted to part of the record.
Perhaps a description of time and place as to each one, as to what it depicts.
They'll speak for themselves once you have a chance to see it.
Yeah, sure, and yeah, if there's gonna be any written record, it just describes the location of the vantage point and stuff. Fine. Ma'am, I think you were up next.
Excuse me.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're enjoying yourself. My name is Dottie Lay, and I live at 648 Hill Farm Road, Fairfield, Connecticut. I know someone said experience wasn't important.
Sorry, can you speak up, please?
Yes, I'll try. I'd like to start with some data from the Connecticut Crash Data Repository, February 2024. The main cause of car accidents is distracted driving. Cell phones are a major cause of distraction, followed by young children. Top 4 crash locations: parking lots, stop signs, rural roads, and 2-lane roads. The corner of 161 Hillside Road has 3 out of these 4 top crash locations. It's dangerous type of location. 4-way intersections are the most dangerous type of intersection. The Hillside Road and Hill Farm Road intersection has had an accident on an average of about 55 every 55 days. And then there was some comment made about, and ladies, please don't take offense, that women were better drivers and they were more cautious and they weren't gonna cause any accidents. Per miles driven, women account for about 60% of traffic accidents. Men only do 62% of the driving, but cause only 58% of the accidents. So just based on the statistics which are accumulated by the state of Connecticut and data entered every day from every accident that involves a motor vehicle in the state. Just looking at that, I see that this be a recipe for disaster. Now, I have pictures that I'd like to show you. You just want to pass these.
Is there one set to pass through or?
Oh, just
we
one
take
page,
one?
one
Okay.
page each. Okay, as you can see, this was August 21st, 2022, 7:55 a.m. I believe it was a Wednesday. I had always a little self-centered, and because I live very close to the intersection, I live next to Clark, next to the vet, and we all live next to Chase Bank. And I don't usually go this way because it's too much traffic and I like to walk and I don't want to be killed. But I happened to be walking along and I didn't even realize this. If you look at the first picture up here, this is at the corner of crossing the intersection. And you can see that tree on the left is Chase Bank. And so those are the cars going down the road very happily. Over to the right, these are the cars that are coming up from Bronson Road. Bronson Road goes down to the corner market there and the V caused by the, well, it's not a V, it's a triangle that the Greenfield Hill area encompasses. The intersection of Hill Farm Road is opposite the first furthest utility pole, so that's way back. And as you can see, Bronson Road has a right of way because this is a four-way intersection down here, but there's no stop sign. So as you can see, this line of traffic goes all the way down to the cleaners in the Greenfield Hill Shopping Center, if you're familiar with the Greenfield Hill. And I will talk about the dumpster later, so we'll save that one. Okay, so moving on. It's interesting to note that the traffic in the morning is very slow because up above this intersection where I live, there's a blind curve. And people go a little more slowly around the blind curve and they know they have to stop. So they stop. And being a four-way intersection and a lot of traffic on, I'm starting to get confused between Hill Farm and Hillside. The traffic on Hill Farm is the greatest amount of traffic, but the next greatest source is Hill Farm. I mean, Hillside when you go down. I hadn't realized exactly how, I mean, I've been living with this and this is every day, this is not special. And I was kind of surprised when I finally put it all together. And then moving on, in an effort to facilitate an even flow of traffic, the proposed daycare center has constructed a schedule for the drop-off of children in the morning, defining drop-off time, pickup time, not pickup time, duration of drop-off. Note, there is no strategy for getting the cars out of the parking lot. Several nursery schools in the area have found standard arrival times to be a flop. Just one child being late or early collapses the schedule. In the high risk for fender benders parking spaces become difficult to find and multiple vehicles backing out simultaneously compound the problem. All the while, other cars keep coming and backing up. Getting out of the parking lot is difficult. The exit is on high volume Hillside Road. Cars leaving the parking area must wait until there's a break in traffic to get onto Hillside Road. There's no stop sign there. They just have to sit there like you would if you were in your driveway and couldn't get out because there was too much traffic. The exit is further compromised every Wednesday morning when the neighboring business has its dumpster emptied. This is what they use. Dumpster. It's a really, really big truck. It's kind of nice though. To get out, it must back out on the diagonal and literally back into the bushes on the opposite side of the street. Truck totally blocks the exit from 161 Hillside Road. The truck then has to make several maneuvers to straighten out and then drive away. During this process, Hillside Road and the exit from 161 Hillside Road are shut down. Then school starts. With children going back to school, our traffic problems increase exponentially, bringing our neighborhood to its knees. Fairfield Country Day School is on Bronson Road. There are 147 students at Country Day and more than 50 faculty staff, most of whom use Hill Farm Road to reach Bronson Road. At 8:30 a.m., a school bus arrives Monday through Friday at the house adjacent to the proposed daycare center. According to First Student, the company the town has hired to provide public school bus transportation, they stated that their stop on Hill Farm Road would be 1 minute and 30 seconds. To be on the safe side, let me just back up a bit. At this time of day, this is looking at my driveway. The motor vehicles pass by my house at the rate of every 2 seconds. To be on the safe side, assume a rate of 6 seconds between cars. That means that during the 1 minute, 30-second bus stop, 15 additional cars will be entering the intersection behind the cars already lined up. Hill Farm Road is shut down. There are other considerations. Snow presents another impediment to parking and exiting. Where is the pile of snow going to be? In the precious parking spaces? Where is the dumpster going? We need to get a truck like this, similar to this. Has to be able to get in, not only empty the dumpster, but they can only empty the dumpster when it's head to head with the dumpster. You can't do it from the side. So this could be a problem. Where are the waiting cars to go? Do they just stay in line until their turn, park on the road or on lawns and walk and carry their toddlers or babies? Or maybe they park in the parking area of the neighboring businesses. What I'm really asking is, why bring more traffic into an already traffic beleaguered neighborhood? Why would anyone put a child in a daycare center at the intersection of Hill Farm and 160, the most dangerous intersection within miles? Why would anyone go to the parking area with a blocked exit? Why would anyone have a playground within feet of a dangerous intersection? Please save our neighborhood. Please save our children. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is this letter submitted? Are they submitting their letters?
This was not submitted.
That's fine, you read it in, so you're fine.
My name is Allison Sousa. I live at 790 Hill Farm Road. I'm diagonally across from the proposed entrance to this bank. about 3 years ago, I moved across town from Fairfield Woods Road, so I'm very familiar with the Goddard School that was this. That's a very different area. It's a state road, and as a result of the Goddard School, or maybe along the same time frame, that intersection was completely reconfigured. It was a very unsafe intersection, and the town put, I think, 3 million, if not more, into that intersection to make it safer. In the proposed plans, there's no change to our current intersection, which we all know is very unsafe. As a mom, I know that drop off takes time and pickup takes time too. There's a lot of chit chat that happens. There's a lot of talking with other parents in the parking lot, so I don't think the proposed 6-minute window of drop off to get back in your car and leaving is a reality. Parents at Southport Congregational, where my daughter goes, will sit in the parking lot for 10, sometimes 20 minutes talking to other parents. Also like to raise the point that there's 3 properties that surround this this business, this proposed daycare, and we all have at least 2 to 3 young children that would qualify in this age bracket, and none of us plan to use this daycare for the reasons of safety and cost, quite frankly. I'd just like to point out that my concern and my husband's concern is that traffic heading west into Westport on Hill Farm Road in the morning, our concern is that people will not pull into a full parking lot, and they will continue down Hill Farm Road west and park on our lawn. And they'll drop their kids off, and then they'll run back to their car, and they'll continue west onto Hill Farm Road and go wherever they're planning to go. My last ask is that if this is seriously considered, I'd like you to redo the traffic study now that school is in session. I think the time frame that they did their traffic study was not accurate or not a true perception of the actual traffic in this neighborhood. So for those reasons, I'd like to thank you all, and that's it.
Any other member of the public that wishes to be heard? So, is there anybody online?
I don't see if anybody has signed up.
Any member of the public that's joining us remotely or by phone wish to be heard on this application, 161 Hillside Road? Member of the public last call in person or joining us remotely wish to be heard in this application? Close the public comment portion to videos. Mr. White, Attorney Allen.
Yes.
I assume.
Yes, I definitely, I think maybe though, before we do that, I know Commissioner Harrison had some questions for Mr. Del Rio, who's in attendance, so maybe before I start.
No, that's fine. You have, I imagine your rebuttal presentation from your expert, so. Mr. Del Rio.
For coming. Just going back to the study that you presented, how many bank sites were included in that data?
I'd have to check on that.
What year of the data were they
Yeah, I have to look into that.
And do we know how many banks were included in the New England, Fairfield County area in the study?
Not,
Would we be able to find that out?
I don't think so, but that'd have to take some digging, I'm not sure.
And then I guess would we be able to know how many banks were in residential areas?
That I don't think they would probably have that like level of context.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can look all that up.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Those are all the follow-up questions I have. Thank you.
Ron?
I was gonna piggyback on that, but I don't know if maybe Attorney Fallon's gonna deal with it in his rebuttal, but I had
Something about traffic or parking.
Yeah, it's about traffic.
Now's the time.
Was, I don't have the traffic study in front of me and I was remote last time, but was the traffic study done during the school year or when was it done?
So the traffic evaluation, so we did not do an analysis. So there was no data collected as far as
Speed
existing.
data?
There was speed data collected because at one point on Hills Farm Road, what is now just an entrance was also going to be an exit originally. And we had to do a sightline analysis because to the left, we have a curvature of the road. To the right, there was no concern because you have,
So you did it with the wire on the road and everything?
So no, we used a radar gun and we got samples. The 85th percentile was 27 miles per hour. The average was 23 miles per hour. I don't think there was a single out of 100 samples taken, a single vehicle over 30 miles an hour. One at 30 miles an hour.
And what date was this taken on or what time of day?
I was just trying to look at that before I came over, but I'd have to look. I don't know the exact date.
And then on the and again, this might be, if it's gonna be handled in rebuttal, but the question of if you're comparing trip generation of daycare versus a bank isn't open at the same time of day as the daycare, that was challenged, so how should that be done then?
This is coming up a lot. Let's see if I can kind of summarize everything as far as the comparison with the bank. It's not a comparison to the old bank, right? Because I can come in today and put it in bank, correct? So it's a comparison, it's an illustrative comparison to what could be done as of right. That is the intent of the comparison. If you don't even do the comparison, you still would not have done, if you weren't doing the increment comparison to the bank, and I just said it was a green site, I still would not have done, typically you would not do a full-blown traffic study. It's about 56 peak hour trips, 30 in, 26 out, I think was the number. Got it right here in front of me. So with that level of trips, for example, if this was a Connecticut DOT road and we were submitting, they would ask me for trip generation and they would ask me for some assignments to show where the cars are going in and out of. And that would typically be it. If there was a concern where there was between 50 and 100 trips, that would be all I would have to do. Now, think about it, right? It's 30 trips in, it's 26 trips out. Most of the trips in are leaving within the hour because they're dropping off and pick up. Some of them are not because those are employees. So 30 trips, when you start to just take the entrance alone. Right, now, we don't know what the exact distribution is, but for easy math, let's say half of them are coming from Bronson and half of them are coming from Hillside. Now that's 15 coming from one direction, 15 coming from the other. Let's go to Bronson. Some of them are going north, some of them are coming south. So the traffic dissipates very, very quickly, is what I'm trying to illustrate. So that any one intersection, any one approach, right? Not the intersection, but any one approach, you're down to like 5 cars an hour pretty quickly. So why would I go and do an analysis on something that is within the variation of Tuesday and Wednesday? Right? We don't have 50 cars every day. Might have 50 today, we might have 55.
But you did an analysis where you compared a bank to a daycare.
Correct, because I was trying to show that it's even less of an impact when you think about, what we're trying to show is.
Less daycare versus bank, but the bank.
Correct. Now, let's look at it the other way. If I was here applying for a bank and I did not do trip generation in the morning, I'd get my head cut off. Right? You would say, why didn't you do trip gen in the morning? Let's be conservative. My banks do open at 8:30. They're generating traffic until 9. It's a standard practice.
I think it's important, one point Greg made, and I was gonna make it in the rebuttal, but I'll do it now. whatever the Chase Bank was, and in my experience, the Chase Bank, when it was open, was quite active. I went by there a number of times a day. But leaving that aside, we didn't analyze, couldn't, because it was closed, what the traffic generation of the closed bank was. We analyzed based upon data, what the traffic generation of a bank would be, which could go in there seamlessly. So I just wanted to make that.
You say that we're not sure though if the bank was part of the data set, like we don't know that, right? So didn't he answer that we don't know if you were
The specific bank and a bank in your neighborhood is may or may not be in ITE's data set, right? What Mike was trying to define earlier was when we do traffic counts, sometimes our companies, the consultants who do the traffic counts will take that data and submit it to ITE. And then they will ask a bunch of questions, and if it's good and it's up to their standards, that will become part of the database. So now they will say, okay, that bank was 5,000 square feet and it generated XY, and it had a drive-in, it did not have a drive-in, it had an ATM, it did not have an ATM. They all generate different things. Now, at one point, people are also hung up on what this bank was like right before it closed, which was maybe a low volume bank with investments. It wasn't always that way, because you wouldn't have a drive-in and it wouldn't have an ATM if it was an investment bank, right? It was a normal, everyday bank, right? To the public for standard banking business. It was not a specialty bank that maybe it may have evolved into towards those last few years. But, it wasn't always that, otherwise it wouldn't have a drive-in and an ATM. So I'm just trying to illustrate.
Put aside the illustration with the bank. I know where you're coming from, and that was fine. It just obviously was set up for criticism, let's put it that way. Put that aside, and you have a new nothing was there, and this is a new use. And it didn't look like you did a traffic study to see whether the roads could handle the new influx of traffic, correct? You didn't do that work. Your point is that you didn't need to.
Correct.
Fine. As you sit here, though, and how often did you go to visit the site?
3-4 times collectively.
Did you do it when in the morning or the evening to see the volume and the log jam of sorts? Okay. And you have an opinion on whether this influx of traffic will certainly add to it, but does it exacerbate it and present such a hardship?
Correct, and
does it or doesn't it, I guess?
It does not cause a significant change in operation or impacts to what's out there today. Okay. And partly for the reasons that I described to you before, it dissipates pretty quickly.
Well, we gotta be mindful though that unlike maybe a bank where the lunch hour could be the most time, this is gonna be hitting mornings and evenings where the peak impacts are already there. So, it's almost be easier if it was spread out during the day. It's not going to be, I would think. You would think you would agree with me that this traffic is going to hit at the times where there's the most traffic on the site or on the area.
Correct.
Okay, and even still, it's your opinion though, this is not going to create a hardship.
What time of year did you visit the bank? Was it during the summer or during the school year?
I have to look back at all the ones. The latest one was just before the last hearing though.
Okay. School started today in Fairfield.
Make some observations.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
I have one more question.
This might not be related, but
Let's keep it on traffic for now,
well, it has to do with
or parking.
parking, like,
All right, parking.
so staff will be there, 15 staff.
Not to interrupt you, Commissioner, but I'm gonna get deeply into that.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm not-
I have a very specific question, which you'll probably be able to address.
Let's keep it to traffic then.
If staff wants to go to one of the neighboring businesses for their lunch hour, how do they get there? Do they walk through, or to get in their car and drive around to the rest of the NDD? Like they can't walk through there, right? They have to get in the car and drive around.
They could do either, I think.
Can you walk through? I mean, is there like a pathway or
On the street.
you can walk on the road? The sidewalks there? Okay.
Sidewalks.
Sidewalk? Oh, okay.
I'll address.
Okay, that was just a question I had.
Commissioner Harrison.
Yeah, just one more question, not really related to traffic, but it was really actually just the process of the drop off. Is there a handler that takes the child out of the car or the parent?
Not to off put, but very much on my list of things I'm gonna have
I look forward to.
the applicant walk everybody through that, no pun intended.
Randolph.
Mr. Del Rio, so you did not do a TIA, is that what we call it here in Connecticut? So.
What does it stand for?
Traffic impact analysis. And you didn't do that because of the volume of traffic generated did not obligate you to?
Correct.
And so did you do traffic counts?
No.
Because again, you weren't obligated to. But you did do observations. So your conclusion relating to the traffic issues and traffic volumes are, if you will, experiential rather than based upon any traffic counts. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes
And then-
yes and no. I mean, it is standard practice for these volumes. Like I said, if it was a state road and we were doing
Understand.
traffic, this is what they would.
Yeah, so if, just to clarify that, if there's more than, what's the number of additional trips that requires you to do a TIA?
Usually 100,
Yeah, more than 100 and you had less than, what, 50?
just over 50,
Just over
56.
50, so you weren't required to. Do you ever conduct TIAs when there's less than 100 cars? Okay, but in this case you didn't.
Correct.
And then what is, so you didn't, because you didn't do a traffic count, you didn't do a TIA, and pardon my imprecise question, but there's always a classification of the congestion and queuing. What's that generally called?
Level of service.
The LOS. So the LOS at these intersections, it hasn't been quantified.
No.
But we heard anecdotally that the level of service, which is basically, it's ranked on a letter scale.
It's ranked on a letter scale and it's based on the average delay per vehicle going through that intersection.
Right, so we don't have a quantification of the LOS at this intersection right now.
Correct.
Okay, but adding 50 trips, even if they were spread out, would likely, even if they're dissipated, which, and so by dissipating means that when you add a car, it goes in different directions usually, so it doesn't add, but even adding 50 cars with a poor level of service would degrade the level of service likely?
Again, that's the reason that we didn't go the full distance and be, burden of, going through a whole traffic study for the client, right, for the applicant.
Right, but you didn't do a TIA, which is a standard form of study.
Likelihood, the high likelihood is there's going to be no impact, there's going to be no change in level of service or, 0.2 seconds of delay change.
I understand what you're saying, but we haven't quantified that or studied that there will be no degradation, and I respect your professionalism, but we haven't quantified that, correct? And then could you talk to me, and this is a little bit off the boundary of the premises, but it is a town problem. We represent the town and the people. Is that intersection designed effectively to control the traffic right now? And this doesn't have anything to do with your project. This is a
No, I
town
understand.
issue. Yeah.
I know where you're coming from. So in regards to so we look at safety and efficiency, right? We always, as traffic and transportation engineers, we say safe and efficient, right? That's our motto. So the efficiency part of it is there, right? Stop controlled, four-way stop. You don't have excessive queues, right? And that's a matter of opinion to certain people what an excessive queue is. But
Can you talk about that?
in terms of level of service,
Explain an excessive queue because we saw a lot of pictures today.
correct.
Talk about
So-
excessive queue.
Everyone's moving, when it's always stop sign, right, you're rotating if it's full, right? If it's fairly congested, let's say, if it has some level of constant demand. You're going around, and the queues that we saw were never more than 3 or 4 deep.
So
Not
pictures.
saying it doesn't get worse.
Pictures of greater queue.
That was at Bronson. Okay, not at Hillside. Every video and picture that shows bad, take a look at it. I'm pretty sure you're looking at Bronson. Okay, you might be looking at Hillside and Bronson, but you're not looking at Hillside and Hill Farm. I'm sorry, Hill Farm.
So queuing in your mind is, for your observation, and I'm sure we'll have.
Queuing in itself is not even necessarily a level of congestion, because if I'm moving through there in less than 20 seconds in the queue,
So
then I still have a decent level of service.
speed and safety, so speed, for your observation, okay, safety. Can you talk
We
about
brought that up last time. There's probably a few things you can do, like move up the stop bar and the stop line and improve some things of that nature for that intersection to address some of the safety
some
aspects.
safety gaps there,
There's some improvements that can be.
opportunities? Okay, thank you.
Anything else from Mr. Del Rio? Mr. Braun?
So I'm looking at ISD on table 3 of your traffic report dated July 23rd. This is where I was confused. I was wondering if I was thinking of a different application, but it says here 35 miles an hour, which is the posted plus 10 miles an hour, but you didn't, but that's different than what you said. I don't understand.
What I said before was on Hill Farm Road, when we were looking at potentially having an exit on Hill Farm. That went away, and we only are looking at an exit on Hillside now.
So
So Hillside is more tangent and doesn't have the same issues that Hill Farm did, which had a horizontal
So-
curve that was going away.
okay, so this intersection site distance analysis
Correct.
is people exiting only, not entering on Hillside. And can they do a right and a left or just
Left and a
looking
right.
left, looking, they can do right or left when they. And that, you did not do a speed study. You took the posted limit and added 10 miles an hour, which is acceptable in traffic analysis. Or you could,
Typically, if there's no speed data, that's what you do.
okay,
Now, just to take care of where I think you're going.
Yeah.
We did analysis, I don't know if it was submitted, but it was prepared. That shows what the actual sight lines are. And it would be, and so the equivalent of that distance of sight line is about over 50 miles an hour. So
so
sight
this says
lines
390 plus is
plus,
distance,
exactly.
that's the actual sight line that you have is,
The actual sight line was 700 and something to one side and 800 feet and something to the other, to the left.
That was
So you
submitted with
could-
the supplemental.
So to the left, I could see past the stop sign. Really, I don't need to see past because, right, they were coming
it
in.
would
at
always be
stop.
good to like give those numbers in the report because, we think of, oh, it's exactly what you need. We don't know how much
No,
more.
That's why it
what's
says
the-
plus.
what's
That's
the
why it
speed
says
of-
plus. It's more than what you need.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from Mr. Del Rio or onward to you, whatever you need, Attorney Fallon?
Onward and upward. All right, good evening, and I thank you for your diligence as always and your patience with regard to the application. Obviously, there's a roadmap here. I have quite a bit to cover. The ultimate goal and where I'll finish is that whenever you are confronted with a special permit / special exception application, especially ones where there is difference of opinion, controversy, ultimately you act in your quasi judicial capacity, which means you have to apply the regulations as you have promulgated them with the facts as they've been determined to be. And so that's what we need to focus on. That's where the rebuttal will be. Obviously, there's a lot of matters that have come up that I need to address. And I think I'll start at this point with our client, Mr. Lee Small. And Lee, if you could come up here, because there were a number of comments, questions, and observations that were made during the course of the proceeding that I think are best addressed and most credibly addressed by Lee. Lee, just for the record, could you identify yourself?
Yep, Lee Small, I live at 73 Sunset Beach Road in Branford, Connecticut. We're the owners of Alphabet Academy and the Nest Schools. and Nest Greenfield Hill, the applicant.
And just for the record, although it's stated, I think in the application document, how many different schools do you and your wife Amy, who's also here tonight, operate?
We currently have 4 schools.
Okay, and how long have you been in operation, starting with the first school and up to the present?
The first school is about 22 years, then we have one about 17 years. 12 years, and the most recent about 4 years.
Okay, the first question I'd like to ask you, and you've been present throughout the hearings, so you'll be familiar with what I'm asking about. These are in no random order of importance, but they were just the way I wrote up the list. There were some comments made about tuition at the school, and the input of those comments where there was some element of exclusivity with regard to the school. Could you address the matter of what the tuition is at what will be here at the Nest, and how that compares relative to other daycare facilities in the area?
Yes. Actually, I'm gonna have Amy talk about tuition, but I can give you the numbers, I believe, okay?
Amy, this is Amy Small, whose experience and operational acumen are also the same as Lee's. And so I guess I asked you the question, Amy, that I asked Lee, and that is, could you address the comments that were made about the tuition that will be charged here, with reference, if you could, to how that compares to other tuition for similarly based programs in the area?
Sure, some of the neighbors said that it was gonna be $45,000 a year, and their attorney echoed that, and that is absolutely not true. Our tuition is going to be $3,000 a month, and that's for the under 3 set, of which we have a total of 16 children. Everybody other than that, it'll be $2,500 a month, and that's for the preschool age. And that comes out to $36,000 and $30,000 respectively. And so.
And do you have any data in terms of how that tuition compares to other daycare facilities, especially in the municipality of Fairfield?
So in Fairfield, I did reach out to the Goddard School via email and asked for the price. They didn't give me the price, but said that there's a 1.5-year wait. However, I did get a price from the Westport Goddard School, which isn't far. And that's $2,975 for under 3 and $2,300 for over 3 and over. Those prices are also without food. We serve food to the children, and that's included in the price. CCDC is a school my granddaughter Lily goes, and her tuition is $2,850 for under 3, $2,325 again without the food. I just wanted to add too that CCDC also charges a 3-month security deposit before you even get started, which is $8,550 before you pay your first month's tuition, because childcare is expensive.
Okay, and for you, Orly, kind of a part of second part of that question, there were comments made that there's little benefit here to Fairfield residents and Greenfield Hill residents, both because of the exclusivity, which you've debunked. But could you tell us what your recent experience has been, either or both of you, with regard to interest, with regard to enrollment at the proposed facility by residents of Fairfield, residents of Greenfield Hill?
Yes, just by looking at our other schools, we draw from within an 8 to 10 mile radius of the school. So Branford, Hamden, all of our clients are within about an 8 to 10 mile radius. We feel the same thing here. Just when we filed our application, we just word of mouth that we filed the application. We didn't publicize it at all. We received over 30 phone calls of people with interest. Of those 30 phone calls, we had 10 people that wanted to fill out a application or a request for tour, which is kind of our entrance level, show of interest. Of those 10, 8 were from Fairfield, 2 were from Southport. So that kind of shows the radius. And also of those 10, 2 had siblings. So another thing we didn't talk about in the parking scheme is that about 15% of all of our clients have siblings. So you're cutting down on the amount of traffic, the amount of cars, the amount of trips because of siblings.
Another question, as long as you raised the matter of parking, and obviously I'll be addressing parking and the studies that you've received and Mr. Green's experts analysis, I'll get into all that. But one thing I think it's sort of fundamental to the commission's considerations based upon the public comments they've heard is the matter of this enforceability of the drop-off requirements that we are basing our analysis on. So could you please discuss with us, you're familiar with what we are proposing, and that is that we will stagger drop-offs as is shown on the chart we submitted, as that chart was analyzed not only by our consultant, but by the opponent's consultants. But talk to us about how this can be enforced. I mean, what you've heard in these proceedings and what the commission has heard is, come on, parents, you know, and you're gonna really turn a kid away who's paying $3,500? Tell me about that. So please tell us about that.
So yeah, we have a lot of rules at our school, and in order for the childcare center to run safely and not just be chasing our tails all day after little children, is we follow those rules. And not for our other schools, but for this school, the rule is going to be that you cannot park in the street, you have to drop off, you have to exit and enter within that 15-minute time period that we set up for you. And we anticipate having a large interest, and we'll have to pick and choose who comes to us. So we might pick families that want to come a little bit earlier in order to make this schedule work for us.
This schedule came out of a meeting with the neighbors and Attorney Green. We said, you know, there is a 3-hour period. That's the busiest. Typical drop off, which we had 3 families here the last hearing testify, takes them about 6 minutes to drop off their child. We said, well, what about a 15-minute increment? That gives people time to talk to a neighbor in the parking lot. Maybe they have to get a car seat out of the back or whatever for their child. So we used the 15-minute increments. And in that schedule, you could see that we always have excess spaces. At the worst case, at 8:30, we have 4 excess spaces. Now, if somebody is running late, you know, there isn't much we can do, but we do have extra space for them. We enforce all of our rules. This would become part of their enrollment contract. When they enroll, they're gonna enroll for $3,000 a month. They're gonna enroll for this 8 o'clock or 8:15 timeframe. And they're gonna be required to pay their tuition on time. They're gonna be required to park on time. They're gonna be required to use their key fob and wear it at all times so that people know that they belong to our school. And when they come to the door, they need to use that key fob to get in. They have a pass code to get through the door. And if there's someone standing behind them with a car seat waiting to get in, they have to say, just a minute, close the door, and that person has to come let themselves in, because each person is responsible for themselves.
And all of that is in writing.
All of that is in writing.
An enforceable contract.
Right. And Amy does an extensive 2-hour interview with each prospective client and goes over the rules and regulations. If they say, well, sorry, that's not for me, then
So are both of
then we
you,
move on.
so are both of you confident that the drop-off system that we have suggested and proposed to the commission is enforceable and will be enforced?
Yes.
Absolutely. First of all, I didn't even think we needed the parking schedule, but we just did it to show good faith for the neighborhood. And people will not, my clients will not be parking on the street. It just won't happen. So I don't see why if we tell them that they can't park on the street, and the neighbors are very concerned, and we had to go through all this, that they would park in the street when we're part of this community and we're very respectful to our neighbors and we're very kind and we've never had a problem.
You know, although talking about street parking, although there is an opportunity at the Goddard School for some on-street parking, I do think in terms of context, it's important, having done the Goddard School, that the Goddard School has 170 students. And it has 31 parking spaces. And I think that compares very favorably in terms of this type of operation to our proposal of 72 students and 28 spaces. So I just wanted to make that point. In a moment, I'm gonna call up Kurt and Bill Kenny, and they're gonna talk to them, have them talk about it. And one of those is going to be the functionality and safety of the play area. You've heard testimony at the last hearing about, oh, it's not a slope, it's a cliff, and it's gonna be dangerous for the kids and et cetera. So I'm gonna have Kurt and Bill testify about that in a minute. But while I have Amy and Lee up here, could you comment? And I don't know, Lee, if you had some photographs or anything, but could you talk a little bit about, again, from your standpoint of experience, the functionality of the play area?
Sure. One comment was because there's a somewhat steep slope from the parking area down to the.
You're talking in the south, in the back, right?
Yes, in the south of the building for the older children, which would be 3 to 5 year olds. The older children's playground, there's a slope before it gets flattened out into the grass area. And we chose to run our fence for the children up the slope. Up the slope, so that it incorporated that slope. We embrace the children climbing on the hill. We embrace them enjoying nature, learning about the trees and the plants, getting dirty. We could see them sliding down that hill in the wintertime.
These are already part of the record. These were part of Mr. Kenny's report, but so they're handy to you. So go ahead, I didn't mean to.
Rather they see it. So we do have, we have slopes at all the schools, basically. One of them in Branford, we actually have rock outcroppings that the kids can climb on the rocks. And again, as Amy goes through with the parents, they have to understand, look, your child's gonna get dirty today. Your child's gonna be outside in the rain. They're gonna be outside in the snow. And this is our program. So we could have run the fence at the base, at the toe of the slope and not incorporated that. But that's a big part of who we are and a lot.
Which direction does the slope go? I'm sorry. Like on this map, yeah.
So it runs
So Hill Farm's on the right,
from the southern part of the parking lot,
the left,
where it's mostly trees.
that's the west side. Hill Farm's on the north, right?
The farm's on the so just on the south. If I could point. Right in that direction.
The left side of the page.
The left side.
To the left of the
Right
parking
here.
lot. That's the slope?
That's
There's also
right.
slope is in between the trees.
Right, so the fence will come up.
And what does the fence do then?
So that's to keep them secure in their play area.
Oh,
While we're talking, and since you mentioned the fence, obviously you both heard the testimony about concerns about the location of the play area. I would point out, however, that if you look at the Goddard School, that play area is also on a corner. If you look at Bright Beginnings, it's also on a corner indeed. Bright Beginnings is at the Circle. We all did that one together too. But there are protections established there at Bright Beginnings, for example, you'll see some bollards. So we've talked, have we not, about improving the considerations relative to the proposed fence? And have you guys looked into that and would agree that in lieu of the fence, as a condition of approval, you would place a stone wall around the perimeter of the play area so that it would buffer the traffic, and the stone wall could be at whatever height the commission deemed appropriate? I would think something in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 feet. But we just wanted to make that's you're agreeable to that?
Yes, yeah, we looked at putting a wall, either a stone wall around that corner to help protect the children from any, if an accident should happen. We also discussed maybe a wood guardrail if the commission thought that was even safer than a stone wall. So we could look at both of those options.
That's your option.
Conditions of approval?
As a condition of approval, yes.
My own personal thinking is the stone wall might be more attractive, but.
Well, we still need a fence.
But you'd still have to have the fence, but the fence would be inside the wall. So,
Yeah.
right. Lastly, before I let you go, I just wanted to reconfirm, and this was, I think, something that you testified to, Amy, last week, that, we wouldn't be planning to hold any school-wide events here. Could you just reiterate that again so that it's
Yeah.
clear for the record? And
So
that could also.
At our other schools, we have about 5 events throughout the whole year. And it would be impossible to do it at this school because there's no parking on the street. So I can't invite the whole school to come park there and have the event there at the same time. There's other things that we could do. We could have an event that's classroom specific. So there's only 8 people there, 10 people there, 20 people there. But we wouldn't have a center-wide event there. We take it elsewhere, to the library, to a park, which we've done in the past for various reasons.
For example, our kindergarten class will be about 10 students. So even if we had kindergarten graduation, there's 10 families, add a couple of grandparents, so maybe 15 cars would really be the kind of size of the event we could have there. It wouldn't be a school-wide.
And that can be a condition of approval as well. Okay, thank you both very much. I'd like Kurt Lowenstein of Land Tech and Bill Kenny of William Kenny and Associates to come forward. I have a couple of questions for them, again, just in terms of points that came up. You gentlemen recall at the last hearing, well, we might as well pick up on without being redundant on the points about the play area. And if you wanted to just expand upon Lee and Amy's testimony in terms of the functionality of the play area as it relates to the slope and whatnot. The photographs have been submitted to the commissioners, so Bill, your thoughts?
Sure, I think they're very helpful in showing that there's both a relatively level area in addition to the slope, so there's different types of area that can be used, and I think the idea of adding a stone wall, it's with the local landscape, and certainly we have plenty of stone walls in Greenfield Hill that line our streetscape, and so I think that fits in quite nicely with the neighborhood landscape, streetscape.
And then you were here last time and you heard some concerns by a neighbor, I can't remember specifically the name, I apologize, but about the concern that was raised by them in terms of runoff, potential runoff from the playground to their property and what impacts that might have. Could you address that, please?
For the record, Kurt Lowenstein, licensed professional engineer in Connecticut. So we did the stormwater analysis for the site. And as John said, there was concern of the neighbor directly to the west of us that the discharge from our proposed stormwater system
would be directed at their property. Emmeline, if it's possible, would you be able to scroll to the next sheet?
Here we go.
Perfect. So if you look to the west, which is the upper portion of that plan, the outlet is that right there where she's indicating is a stone riprap apron, which is directing the water towards the wetland pocket in the southwest corner of the site. All the existing topography in that portion of the site directs towards the back in the wetland, so we're not changing the direction of flow of water. And in fact, as is demonstrated in our stormwater analysis, from the pre-development conditions, meaning the parking lot that's in the back there, the bank building that's there, the existing grading, we're reducing the amount of runoff, the peak runoff rate, by upwards of 50% from pre to post, meaning with the implementation of our stormwater system, including where it's discharging, the amount of runoff going towards that wetland pocket, again, not being directed at the neighbor at the west, being directed towards the wetland pocket there, as it does now, is being decreased by 50% or more for the 1 year all the way up to the 100-year storm. And that outlet protection, that riprap apron, which is designed to dissipate the flows that will be coming out of the pipe at the end there, has been sized all the way up to the 100-year storm event. Meaning, when you have a 100-year storm, you're looking at roughly 8 to 9 inches of rainfall over a 24-hour period. It's sized to handle that coming out, discharging from our system. And just to further reiterate, this stormwater design has been fully reviewed during the code review process, post-code review by your engineering staff, has been approved by them. And from the environmental perspective, the conservation department has reviewed it as well and did not find any impacts to the wetland pocket itself.
And Kurt, while you were here at the last hearing, you also heard some testimony with regard to questions in terms of how snow storage would be handled. I would point out parenthetically that the school, the Nest, will follow the closing and delay requirements of the town's public schools. But leaving that aside, as a result of those questions about snow storage, did you prepare an additional drawing that would show areas where snow storage could be accommodated?
We did.
And is that what's up on the board now?
That's correct.
Okay, could you just briefly review that with the commission?
So starting from the Hill Farm Road, the entrance side, on either side of the entrance, the areas that are indicated by the map there, it's a crosshatch pattern. You'll see that in multiple locations that I'll walk you through throughout the site, but there's two pieces to the right and left as you come in where potential snow storage could be placed. As you move into the site, going to the south, right off of the first turn there, you could store snow between the fence line and the curb line. And again, as you make your way through to your exit, to the left and to the right of your exit, again, being on the property here, but you could store snow to either side there as well.
And you also heard some testimony from Mr. Monteleone about the turning radius for a particular size, it was a 30 truck. And although his testimony was physically it worked the way it was originally proposed, and that technically we quote checked the box. Did we determine to revise the geometry of that particular turning radius?
We did.
And is that the plan? We submitted that also?
That's
and obviously
correct.
I gave Mr. Green copies of all these things at the time they were submitted. And so could you just briefly discuss with the commission the modifications that we made there?
Yep, so on the Hillside Road exit, which is at the lower left-hand corner of that plan there, the southerly radius, which would be the left radius there, we widen that slightly to match where the edge of the existing curb cut is to give it a little bit more breathing will, if you will. So while I stand by the previous plan that you could get an SU-30 truck out of there, without causing any kind of impact, we just provided a little bit extra fluff, if you will, to allow for a little bit more easy access out.
While I have you here, I'm going to, in the course of my rebuttal, address Mr. Green's comments of this evening, but since you're here, one of his comments was with regard to the compliance with section 28.4, I believe it was, and the dimensional requirements of the spaces at 9 by 18. And we could pull up, I don't know what drawing you want to use. That's good. Okay, so, and he identified, I believe it was maybe 2 spaces, which based upon the note that he also referenced, he indicated were not compliant with that 9 by 18 standard. Could you address that? Because I know that's an issue you discussed in the preparation of this site plan with staff.
Yes, that did come up in the code review meeting that we had. Originally, we did have the parking lot with the proper 9 by 18 as we typically would. But the concern came up with, we have a beautiful row of existing screening trees there. And was there a way that we could achieve what we needed from a parking standpoint while still maintaining that tree line? And to do that, we were able to maintain the existing parking lot edge. And as was brought up, and not to put words in Jim's mouth, I'll let him speak to that if, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but there was an allowance of 2 feet of basically overhang of a car to park. Think if you had a curb stop or wheel stop rather, you would have an 18-foot space, and typically a wheel stop sets 2 feet back. So when you pull into that space, it is an 18-foot space, but the front of your car can overhang that. And if you look at Appendix A in the zoning regulations, it's not part of the record, but if you refer to Appendix A, and we certainly can submit that, you'll see that there's a diagram that demonstrates that. It's a 9 by 18 space. The wheel stop is set 2 feet back and shows that projection. And that's a legally conforming space within your zoning regulations. So that's what we're simulating here with those spaces that are slightly less than 18. At no point are they less than 16. We're maintaining that 2-foot overhang, but that was the principal reason why we amended the original design, like, as I said, was the full 9 by 18, was based on guidance we received from staff.
And the motivation was to save the trees.
Correct.
Okay, I thank you, gentlemen, thank you very much. They're all, yes.
Clarification, with that, I know the regulation requires an 18-foot parking space. Do you need to get a variance for a 16-foot?
What's the regulation for the 16 feet, I guess is the question. For anybody, Mr. Wyman, if you know it.
Yeah, okay, if you look at comment number 12 in the code minutes, under zoning, but there's a provision in the regulations that allows for curb overhang to count in that feet. So while it's 16 feet from the striping to the curb, there's 2 feet that allows the bumper to overhang that 2 feet. Again, as Mr. Lowenstein stated, the original plan anticipated removal of a mature evergreen screening to the adjacent neighbor, so that 2-foot curb overhang to be included in the parking calculation, save that, but that's in section, I just had it. It's in section 28, there's an allowance in 2 sections under the construction section, and then in the appendix, it shows an allowable curb overhang. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, thank you very much. Few other items that came up that I wanted to just address. There's the question of sidewalks, which always come up. That's the good discretion of the commission. My own personal judgment, I don't count you do, is that really sidewalks are not prevalent in this area. The sidewalks here would be a sidewalk to nowhere. There's no real connection if we put sidewalks in here into any of the residential areas. I think the residential areas, generally in my experience, prefer not to have sidewalks in a rural area such as this. And also to have such sidewalks to nowhere, in my judgment, invite a sort of false sense of security sometimes for pedestrians. And so again, I can't say much more about that, but I don't think sidewalks are prevalent or well served.
Let me ask you this, I mean, one of our thoughts let's do the sidewalks is, yes, maybe it's a sidewalk now, but then next year, the year after, another development next door it's maybe it
You
builds.
you have to make that judgment.
I guess my question is though, is if that is required of the applicant, can it be done with what you're proposing, with the potential new guardrails and things like that? Or is everything is it prohibited,
So Kurt, well, could you address that? The question that the chair had is, if the commission were to decide that they wanted some perimeter sidewalks here, is that accomplishable here in the context of the site, the topography, everything else that we've discussed? I don't know if you wanna put up the site plan, maybe I'll.
And I say that knowing now with the potential concession of putting up guardrail or a wall by the around the playground. So keeping that in mind, sorry, go ahead.
It would be challenging to put a sidewalk in here. The topography along the edge of the road is not well equipped for that. Sure, if there's always if there's a will, there's a way, but it would require extensive regrading, potentially retaining walls along there. So it's not ideal for sidewalks, I would say, from a design standpoint, but
if, again, I get fair point with it being maybe even cost prohibitive, I'll leave that to you, but if it was required, it could be done, you're not recommending it.
correct, yeah, you have the width there between the edge of the road, the travel way and the right of way.
Just on hillside, is there enough room between the existing stone wall and the curb to put it in?
Yeah, you have the width there, it's dealing with the challenging topography along there. Like I said, anything can be done, it would just be a heavy lift. It's not a simple just, laying down
But the
asphalt.
space is there.
Yeah, you have, between the road and the property line per se on hillside, there's probably 15-20 feet there.
Commissioner Randolph?
Have you asked in your conversations with Attorney Green and the neighbors, have you discussed putting a sidewalk in?
Not that I recollect.
Is there an opportunity to have that discussion still, or is it too late?
Certainly, I think I think we're not gonna close tonight, so rather than me speaking for the neighbors and saying, I don't think they'd like sidewalk, I could ask their attorney, so yeah, I'll do that. We do happen to chat most days.
Thank you.
The only,
Let me ask you this, we got 10 minutes left, you tell me when you have a good break.
I got a couple of things and then I think I have a good break point. I was just gonna make one more comment. Well, the other thing I was just gonna say about the sidewalks is I recognize that, and I've witnessed many times that we have engaged in the placement of sidewalks in the anticipation that, other properties would be subject to future development, and we could extend the sidewalks there. The two questions I think you have policy-wise to ask yourself there is, number one, do you want the sidewalks up in that neighborhood? And number two, is this neighborhood also been so substantially developed that, you're not gonna have the opportunity to mandate extension of sidewalks? I mean, Mr. Foley's property, Mr. Foley's property is there, the shopping center is there, everything is there, so, is it likely somebody's gonna come along and say, I wanna build an office building there? I don't know, that's for you to think about. We talked about the snow removal. There were some comments about Branford and our Branford location and photographs and so on and so forth. I just want to put that in context. 161 students at the Branford location and 20 staff. So overall, there's 181 people, okay, comparing to our number of 72 and 15. There are 35 spaces at Branford, on-site spaces. The rest of it is, on-street parking, whatever, and we don't enforce, mandate, or require any drop-off schedule. So Branford is really apples and oranges to what we're trying to do here. We recognize this is a different site, it's a different neighborhood. So the photographs that you saw with regard to Branford really don't have bear much meaning here.
Is there I asked this Attorney Green, is there a parking requirement here?
No, I believe it falls under the last catchphrase of section 28 point whatever, and that is with regard to all other uses, such parking as the commission feels to be adequate and appropriate, right, Mr. Nguyen?
Correct.
Yeah, so there is no specific parking standard for daycare facilities.
Go ahead.
We talked about the turning radius, so where I am now, it'd probably be a good place to start. I wanna dive into the sufficiency of parking, respond to the Simcoe report and the testimony that was offered. I wanna do a deep dive into the traffic and the testimony that you heard and you did. And then lastly, I wanna go, and I thank Mr. Green for introducing it, McLaughlin. We'll talk about McLaughlin and we'll talk about it in the context of the facts that I will then summarize for your own whatever, because I know you have a very full and meaningful agenda behind us. I would anticipate that if we're gonna just finish with my rebuttal, as I've just outlined it, I can accommodate that in 45 minutes.
Is there anything kind of small, you got?
Yeah, I
a
mean,
topic of
I
5
could,
minutes?
yeah, sure. Like a stand-up comedy, sure, yeah. Can you entertain me for 5 minutes? You're the one about. Yeah, let's talk about parking, okay? Let's start by reviewing the comments here of the Simcoe report, Mr. Monteleone. First of all, if you have that here, if you look at it on page 1, he makes a statement of certain assumptions, and that is each student drop-off would take 15 minutes to complete. Now, we did, as Mr. Small indicate, to be totally conservative with the neighbors when we met with them and prepared that drop-off study at their request. We did use a 15-minute increment, but everybody will tell you, including my clients who for 23 years have been running 4 other facilities, that the average drop-off time is really 7 to 8 minutes. So right off the bat, it's kind of skewered. The other thing he did, if you look at page 1, is he only counts in his parking analysis 26 unrestricted spaces on the assumption that I'm not gonna count the 2 handicap spaces because there's no guarantee they'd be used. Well, again, based upon 23 years of experience in 4 different locations, the handicap spaces are used all the time. Because we do have clients who, as you might imagine, have some disabilities and do use handicap parking spaces. So it's certainly arbitrary at best to say, well, we're gonna not count the spaces. If you go up to the the 3rd paragraph on the 1st page where he talks about parking generally, he says, although 28 spaces are proposed, this may not be enough to safely accommodate the AM peak period. I ask you to hold that in your mind, go back and read it, because when we come back to talk about McLaughlin, I'm gonna return to that. May not be enough. Then when you even under all those assumptions, where he has not gonna count the handicap spaces, gonna assume 15 minutes, we use his chart, which is on page 2. And if you read the chart, again, eliminating the 2 spaces and the things I've said, on the last corner here, it says spaces unoccupied. In other words, when you're at full capacity. And he goes down, as he said, minute by minute, from 8:20 to 8:40. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I won't count them, but I can actually add 20 places. Even by his estimate, there is one moment at 8:33 where he says there are no spaces unoccupied. He doesn't say that there's no spaces available. He just says that at this 1 minute, there's 1 space unoccupied. So if this is the opponent's grail relative to the insufficiency of the parking, it's totally flawed, because it eliminates 2 spaces from consideration because they're handicap spaces. It seems rather terrible. He assumes that you're gonna be 15 minutes on each child when it's actually 7 to 8 minutes. And then even when you take all those assumptions, he says, I've got 1 minute where I can show that all the spaces are occupied. Maybe that's why on page 1, he says they may not be sufficient. The other thing he says on page 3 is, and this came up, I think, Commissioner Braun sort of asked a question along this line. Well, you got those 7 spaces in the back and nobody's gonna see them and, you know, they're gonna be driving around. Those 7 spaces are gonna be designated for staff. So we're not going to have parents hunting around and seeking spaces they can't see. That's where the staff's gonna park. Those will be for staff parking. And I think it's interesting, finishing up on this report from Mr. Monteleone. At no point in this, they had the right and they did hire a quote unquote expert. And he rendered this report, which I've just been discussing with you, dated August 13, 2024. At no point does he challenge Mr. Del Rio's findings or testimony with regard to traffic generation, traffic endpoints. He limits his comments to sufficiency of parking, may not be, but then he says what he says, and vehicular circulation. So there's no testimony offered here relative to a parking analysis, a traffic analysis. And the testimony that you heard from him tonight was not anything other than, again, classic McLaughlin, which we'll talk about. These are my thoughts. He didn't do a traffic study. I don't know, I should have asked him if he ever visited the site. Shame on me, but maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I would not be surprised if he didn't. And so I think that that's what I have to say about parking, and I'd like to pick up from there. Thank you. And I covered it.
That's 5 minutes.
So I can do 2 minutes.
We'll leave this hearing open to finish rebuttal. I will close the meeting for tonight.
I thank you very much for your patience.
Public. Commission